Chapter 1190. Qin Nan felt like he had just witnessed a series of shocking events. The astonishment in his eyes lingered for a long time. Even though the Anti-Heaven Alliance had only been established for a short 5 years, thus it did not have a strong background, each of the 10 short sentences was enough to shake the hearts of the people, like an epic. Slaying a martial god and 3 martial monarchs in just 5 years. Expanding from a single person to 3 martial gods and 9 martial monarchs in just 5 years. Who else in the Kanglan continent could do that? This magical hair sword god is a legend of his generation. Qin Nan could not help but murmur to himself. He made up his mind that if he had the chance in the Anti-Heaven Alliance, he would have to meet the magical hair sword god with his own eyes. Qin Nan, it's about time. Let's go and see what rank you've obtained in the first round. Yifeng, who was standing beside him, spoke at the right time. What's your ranking? Qin Nan was slightly startled. He did not expect the first round to have a ranking system. However, before he could ponder further, Yifeng had already walked toward the dojo behind the boulder, thus he had no choice but to follow him. On the dojo were 65 cultivators, 25 of whom had reached the peak of the martial ancestor realm, while the remaining 40 were between the first layer martial ancestor realm to the 9th layer martial ancestor realm. Floating in front of these cultivators was a golden board. Names and information were floating on the golden board. Gasp, as expected of the son of a martial monarch, obtaining a total of 150,000 contribution points in the first round. TSK, 150,000 contribution points. I bet he's coming first in the first round? Nonsense, of course he's coming first. Yu Langyan is so impressive. The cultivators could not help but exclaim when they saw the golden roll before them. Meanwhile, their gazes toward the figures in front of them were filled with respect. 150,000 contribution points, what does that mean? Qin Nan glanced at Yifeng. In the Anti-Heaven Alliance, you can exchange your contribution points for various treasures, herbs, etc. The only way to earn contribution points is to kill the people of the South Heaven sacred ground. For example, killing an ordinary disciple or elder would give you 1,000 contribution points, while killing an important person of the South Heaven sacred ground would give you 10,000 contribution points. If you're a martial monarch, it would be 1,000,000 contribution points. You've just arrived at the Anti-Heaven Alliance, so your results are not out yet, but they will be out soon. Yifeng said slowly with a smile on his face. Judging from the current situation, Qin Nan would definitely be the first. Qin Nan instantly came to a realization after hearing this. It turned out that the first round of the trial was based on the number of enemies killed and the number of contribution points awarded. Huh? This is Moo? Qin Nan was about to take a look at the golden ranking when he suddenly discovered a familiar figure in front of him. He immediately took a closer look with his left eye of the divine god of battle. Following this, his face was filled with astonishment as he blurted out, "Why was Moo here?" Moo turned her head around. When she saw Qin Nan, the coldness in her eyes dissipated as her face was filled with joy. It was him indeed. He had come to the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Many cultivators in front of the golden ranking were confused as they turned their heads toward Qin Nan. They were familiar with Moo. When they first arrived at the Anti-Heaven Alliance, many of them were attracted by Moo's icy temperament. However, Moo was too cold, thus they had not been able to strike up a conversation with her. Who was it that could make such an icy woman so surprised? "Why are you here?" Qin Nan asked with a frown. Why was she here at the Anti-Heaven Alliance instead of staying at the Dragon Emperor court? Since you left, I've been classified as a 2-starred enemy by the South Heaven Gate, possibly because of my flesh. Therefore, the 9-tailed monarch beast sent me to the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Moo's eyes were filled with excitement instead of anger. Qin Nan was startled. He was well aware of Moo's serene infernal flesh, which possessed a terrifying power. Even someone as powerful as the nine-tailed monarch beast had no idea how to deal with it. However, to Qin Nan's surprise, Mu Mu was targeted by the South Heaven Gate because of her flesh. Cultivator, I'm Yu Langyan, the son of martial monarch Langyan. May I know who you are? A calm voice could be heard all of a sudden. A handsome young man in a white robe with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes slowly approached the crowd. When he glanced at Qin Nan, he began to read the content in his eyes. In the end, it was the attitude of someone in a superior position looking down on someone in a lower position. The cultivators nearby were startled. Their gazes toward Qin Nan were filled with a hint of disdain. Before the man had arrived, Yu Langyan had tried his best to please Mu Mu. It was obvious that he was interested in Mu Mu, but Mu Mu had always ignored him. But now, Mu Mu was welcoming the man with a smile. How could Yu Langyan not be pleased? Therefore, it was obvious that Yu Langyan was planning to suppress the man. After all, where there were people, there would always be competition. Even though everyone in the Anti-Heaven Alliance had a common enemy, thus they could be considered as friends, it was normal for them to compete with one another. Mu Mu's eyes turned cold. She always thought this Yu Langyan was a hypocrite, and now he was looking for trouble with brother Qin Nan. Before Qin Nan could respond, a name suddenly appeared on the golden ranking, which began to vibrate. The cultivators present subconsciously turned their heads to look. When they saw it, they were immediately shocked. 275,000 contribution points? Holy crap! How many people of the South Heaven sacred ground did he kill? Qin Nan? Could it be that Qin Nan? The astonishment in the eyes of the cultivators thickened. A few months ago, the 7 martial trees had soared into the sky. Who in the world had not heard of Qin Nan's name? However, they did not expect this Qin Nan to come to the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Qin Nan? Yu Langyan's expression darkened. With Qin Nan's arrival, there was no way he could come first in the trial. First of all, it was not a big deal. Most importantly, the authorities of the Anti-Heaven Alliance would only focus their attention on Qin Nan instead of him. Looks like a strong opponent has arrived. Yu Langyan murmured as he subconsciously clenched his fists. Cultivator Yu Langyan. A voice could be heard all of a sudden. Yu Langyan collected his thoughts and frowned. His gaze was unfriendly. Qin Nan had stolen his limelight all of a sudden, causing him to feel unpleasant. The man before him was quite close to Mu Mu, thus he had changed his mind. Instead of simply knocking him down, he was going to teach him a lesson and vent his anger. Qin Nan brought his fists together with a calm smile. I'm Qin Nan, nice to meet you. End of chapter. Chapter 1191. Yu Langyan's expression froze instantly. Qin Nan? The person he was trying to teach a lesson to was Qin Nan? Even though Yu Langyan was quite prideful as the son of a martial monarch, he more or less knew where he stood. He was already relieved that Qin Nan did not teach him a lesson, let alone teaching Qin Nan a lesson. The cultivators on the dojo stared with their eyes and mouths open wide. Their faces were filled with disbelief. They did not expect this ordinary-looking young man, who seemed to be quite close to Mu Mu, to be the famous Qin Nan. Is that Qin Nan? Such a powerful aura. Seeing him in person is better than hearing about him. The experts in the palaces in the sky were startled too. They immediately scanned the place with their divine sense. The reason being that Qin Nan's reputation was simply too outstanding, thus it was impossible for him not to attract their attention. That being said, most of them were extremely respectful toward Qin Nan. Even though Qin Nan had yet to achieve the martial monarch realm, the difference between them and Qin Nan was like the difference between the heavens and earth. As for the rest, their eyes flickered with stern looks. It was impossible to tell what they were thinking about. After all, the resources of the Anti-Heaven Alliance were limited. Now that Qin Nan had joined the alliance, it would surely affect their profits. So, So it's my friend Qin Nan, nice to meet you. Yu Langyan collected his thoughts and said with an awkward expression. Before Qin Nan could speak, a piercing sound could be heard as an illusionary figure landed on the dojo. A monarch aura spread into the surroundings. Qin Nan and the rest of the cultivators immediately raised their head. Greetings, Hall Leader Ancient Lightning. Yifeng immediately brought his fists together. The illusionary figure was none other than one of the vice leaders of the Anti-Heaven Palace, the clone of the Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch. No need to be so courteous. The clone of the Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch let out a calm smile as his gaze scanned the crowd, before landing onto Qin Nan's figure. He reached out his hand and slapped at Qin Nan's figure. Rumble! A giant thunderous palm was summoned, emitting a thunderous might, as if it were going to destroy the heavens and earth. Yu Langyan and the rest of the cultivators were startled. They did not expect the Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch's clone to make a move. Nan also sensed a great danger at that instant, thus he unleashed his martial tree without hesitation. Break! At that instant, 7 martial trees sprang into the sky from his back and collided with the thunderous palm with a formidable will. The crowd could only feel the sky darkening as the giant thunderous palm was shattered into pieces and scattered in all directions. Haha, little friend Qin Nan, please don't blame me. I've long heard of your great name, so I couldn't help but test you. Now, it seems like the rumors are true. I'm afraid you won't be able to defeat anyone below the Martial Monarch realm. The Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch burst out laughing, without concealing the admiration in his eyes. Yu Langyan, the surrounding cultivators, and the experts in the palaces were astounded. Even though they were already aware that Qin Nan had 7 martial trees, they were still astounded when they saw it with their own eyes. It was an attack from the clone of a martial monarch. Even though many among them were peak martial ancestor realm experts, they would have to expend a great amount of energy to resist the attack. Thus there was no way they could do it as easily as Qin Nan. Senior, you're flattering me, Qin Nan said calmly. Not proud, not impatient, not servile, not arrogant, not bad. The Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch nodded slightly, before he straightened his face and said, First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone who has passed the first trial of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Now, let's move on to the second trial. Hearing this, the cultivators became energetic. It was obvious that they were treating the second trial with great importance. The Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch waved his hand, summoning a 9-zhang tall, yellow pillar engraved with countless ancient runes and emitting an ancient aura. It floated in the air. This is a rare artifact from the ancient era, known as the Pillar of Courage. It was originally used to test a person's courage, but after the Alliance leader modified it, it can now test how courageous you are to attack the South Heaven sacred ground. Qin Nan and the cultivators were startled. They did not expect the second trial to be a test of something like this. The test of the Pillar of Courage is very simple. Just place your hand on the pillar, and it will produce a courage crystal according to your courage to attack the South Heaven sacred ground. I believe you all know that the Anti-Heaven Alliance has 4 palaces. To enter the Anti-Heaven Palace, your cultivation must be at the peak martial ancestor realm, and you must have produced 3 courage crystals. Enter. The Star Aligning Palace has no requirement for your cultivation. You will need to take part in a special trial and 2 courage crystals. As for the Dark Shadow Palace and the Mystic Treasure Palace, there is no requirement for your cultivation either. You only need 1 courage crystal, the Ancient Lightning Martial Monarch explained. Hearing this, Qin Nan immediately came to a realization as to why the Anti-Heaven Alliance would hold such a trial. The South Heaven Sacred Ground and the South Heaven Gate had stood firmly in the Kanglan continent for tens of thousands of years. Many experts had tried to invade them, but none of them had succeeded, indicating how terrifying they were. As such, even though some people were deemed as enemies by the South Heaven Gate, they subconsciously feared the South Heaven Gate. they would not have the courage to attack the South Heaven Gate. Therefore, the Anti-Heaven Alliance needed to select the candidates through the Pillar of Courage, to form an Anti-Heaven Palace that would never run away. The trial begins now, starting from the person who is ranked last in the first trial. The ancient lightning martial monarch flicked his finger, causing the Pillar of Courage to slowly descend and land on the dojo. I see. I hope I can join the Anti-Heaven Palace. The cultivators on the dojo blurted out as they collected their thoughts. Among the 4 palaces, the Anti-Heaven Palace was the strongest. If they were able to join the Anti-Heaven Palace, their status and resources would be significantly better. Soon, the first cultivator stepped forward and placed his hand on the Pillar of Courage. A few breaths later, following a white glow, a white, diamond-shaped rock slowly appeared in front of him. It was a courage crystal. Seeing this, the cultivator's expression dimmed slightly. He let out a sigh and withdrew from the place. The trial continued. Most of the cultivators on the dojo only managed to produce 2 courage crystals. Only a few managed to produce 3. To Qin Nan's surprise, Mu Mu managed to produce 3 courage crystals too. Time gradually passed, and it was finally Yu Longyan's turn. Yu Longyan glanced at Qin Nan and took a deep breath. His eyes flickered with determination as he placed his hand on the Pillar of Courage. A few breaths later, a blinding white glow was emitted. Is that, the cultivators held their breaths. Even the hearts of the countless experts in the palaces in the sky trembled. End of the chapter. Chapter 1192. The process did not end after the first, second, and third courage crystals were produced. The white glow continued to accumulate, and when the 5th courage crystal was produced, the Pillar of Courage finally fell silent. Yu Longyan was overjoyed when he saw this. 5 courage crystals? Gasp, so he can produce 5 of them? As expected of a martial monarch's son, he's a lot stronger than us. The cultivators on the dojo exclaimed in astonishment. In addition to that, the experts in the palaces in the sky were astounded too. The new cultivators might be clueless, but they were well aware of it. The number of courage crystals produced during the Pillar of Courage test was more than 3. For example, the martial monarch realm experts of the Anti-Heaven Alliance had produced at least 6 courage crystals during the test. Among them, the ancient lightning martial monarch was even more terrifying, as he had produced 9 courage crystals in a single attempt. That being said, he was only a martial monarch. Among the cultivators below the martial monarch realm, apart from the 2 disciples of the magical hair sword god, martial monarch Rongtian and martial monarch Minkong, who had produced 6 courage crystals during the test before achieving the martial monarch realm, no one else was able to do so. Not to mention 6, even if it was 5 courage crystals, the number of people who could do it could be counted on one's fingers. It seems like this Yu Longyan will be given a certain position after joining the Anti-Heaven Palace. That goes without saying. The eyes of the experts flickered as they communicated with one another. In the Anti-Heaven Alliance, apart from the martial monarchs, the peak cultivators of the martial ancestor realm would compete with one another too. Normally, the more courage crystals they produced, the more important the position they would be given. Yu Longyan, right? Well done, keep up the good work. The ancient lightning martial monarch's clone said. I won't disappoint Hall Leader. Yu Longyan brought his fists together in excitement. The ancient lightning martial monarch's clone nodded slightly before shifting his gaze with a calm smile. Qin Nan, it's your turn. Don't let me down. Acknowledged. Qin Nan responded and headed toward the Pillar of Courage. In an instant, whether it was the cultivators on the platform or the experts in the palaces in the sky, all eyes were on Qin Nan. It's Qin Nan's turn. I wonder how many courage crystals this kid can condense. I've heard that he's a 3-star enemy of the Southern Heaven Gate. He was even hunted down by the great Emperor Nanjian. I think he can condense at least 6. A series of voices could be heard. Everyone's eyes were filled with anticipation. At that instant, a golden glow burst out from the leading palace among the 4 palaces in the sky, as a faint aura of the martial monarch realm burst into the surroundings. The cultivators and the experts were dumbfounded. Qin Nan's test of the Pillar of Courage had actually alarmed a great emperor? The eyes of the ancient lightning martial monarch flickered as the grin on his face grew wider. He was not surprised that the great emperor was paying close attention to Qin Nan. He only hoped that Qin Nan would not let him down this time. Qin Nan, do your best. Mu Mu, who was standing at the back, waved her hand as her eyes flickered. As soon as he said this, Yu Langyan, who was already feeling a little indignant, turned gloomy. Even though he was incomparable to Qin Nan in terms of surpassing the rules of cultivation, he was still a martial monarch. Why was everyone not paying attention to him? Why didn't this Mu Mu even look him in the eye? Wasn't it a little too unfair? Damn it, he better give me a courage crystal. Despite being displeased, Yu Langyan could only curse in his heart. As for Qin Nan, he no longer paid any attention to the crowd as he approached the Pillar of Courage. He raised his hand and placed it on the Pillar of Courage. At that instant, an illusionary feeling rose in Qin Nan's heart. It felt like a giant web had appeared in front of him, encapsulating his figure while emitting an invisible force that flowed into his body as if it was searching for something. So this is how the test works? Qin Nan raised his eyebrows slightly as his eyes flickered with excitement. He had been interested in the Pillar of Courage since the beginning, as he was curious to know how brave he was to challenge the South Heaven Gate. If that's the case, I'll unleash them all, Qin Nan murmured. The divine battle spirit within his body suddenly let out a soundless roar. The people outside could not see it, but a terrifying battle intent rose rapidly inside Qin Nan's body. His blood began to boil vigorously. At that instant, the Pillar of Courage began to vibrate vigorously as if it had sensed something. A magnificent white glow burst out from it. If one were to glance down from the sky, it felt like a white sun was rising on the spacious dojo. Is that the ancient lightning martial monarch's eyes widened? In addition to him, the martial monarch who was observing the dojo, the experts, and the cultivators on the dojo were astounded. Their eyes flickered with astonishment. The reason being that the white glow was simply too brilliant. The white glow that was triggered by the smoke was like the light of a firefly compared to the brilliance of the sun and the moon. Crap, it's going to explode. Qin Nan, who was in the middle of the test, was startled. He did not expect the Pillar of Courage, which had been modified by the magical hair sword god, to be so fragile. The battle intent in his heart had just been unleashed, but it was already on the verge of collapsing. This won't do. This Pillar of Courage must be extremely rare. If it explodes, how is the Anti-Heaven Alliance going to conduct the test? Withdraw it at once. Qin Nan immediately made up his mind. He quickly withdrew his battle intent with his divine sense. However, the battle intent was simply too overwhelming. Even though he was trying his best to withdraw it, the Pillar of Courage was still on the verge of exploding. Withdraw at once. Qin Nan snapped in his heart as his will rose to its limit. That formless battle intent was like a giant wave that was being pulled by an invisible force. It was not submerged, but was rapidly retreating into the sea. The Pillar of Courage seemed to have sensed something too. Its trembling weakened rapidly. The white glow it was emitting was no longer as brilliant as before. The ancient lightning martial monarch was startled. The martial monarch, the experts in the sky, and the cultivators on the dojo were startled as they sharply sensed something. Why did they feel that the glow was weakening? End of chapter. Chapter 1193. As Qin Nan withdrew his battle intent, The glow emitted by the pillar of courage weakened rapidly too. In just less than a few breaths' time, the glow emitted by the pillar of courage was extremely weak, which was less than half of Yu Langyan's glow. Finally, it stopped. Qin Nan let out a relieved sigh in his heart. He had almost lost control of his battle intent and caused the pillar of courage to explode. However, as he let out a sigh of relief, the glow on the pillar of courage slowly gathered and transformed into 2 courage crystals, returning the place to calm. Qin Nan was slightly startled seeing this, before a wry smile appeared on his face. It seemed like he had been too focused on withdrawing his battle intent, and he had done it too badly. He had only managed to produce 2 courage crystals, which was something that even the Anti-Heaven Palace could not afford to join. However, when the ancient lightning martial monarch and the others saw this, their hearts exploded silently as their eyes were filled with disbelief. 2 courage crystals? Are you kidding me? Qin Nan only managed to produce 2 courage crystals? What's going on? This doesn't make any sense. Qin Nan should have at least 3 courage crystals, right? Even the ancient lightning martial monarch's clone shared the same reaction. Qin Nan was a genius who had surpassed the rules of cultivation, and was considered a 3-starred enemy of the South Heaven Gate, who had been hunted down by the martial monarch realm experts of the South Heaven Gate. How could he only have 2 courage crystals to face the South Heaven Gate? Impossible, this is impossible. Mu Mu collected her thoughts and said firmly. How could Qin Nan not have the courage to face the South Heaven Gate? Yifeng's face was filled with disbelief too, as he had witnessed Qin Nan's imperious appearance with his own eyes. Yu Langyan, who was standing not far away, burst out laughing upon hearing this. Ha ha ha, Mu Mu, as the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. Qin Nan might be strong, but it's not impossible for him to be so afraid of the South Heaven Gate. Hearing these words, the crowd shuddered. Yu Langyan was right, they could not judge a book by its cover. In any case, there was no way the Pillar of Courage would make a mistake. As the thought crossed their minds, the cultivators and the experts on the dojo began to look at Qin Nan with disdain. Disdain and disdain. So what if he had surpassed the rules of cultivation? So what if he was a 3-starred enemy? He did not even have the courage to face the South Heaven Gate. As such, they were no longer as important to the Anti-Heaven Alliance. The expression of the ancient Lightning Emperor's clone changed. Even though he couldn't believe it, he had no choice but to accept it. Yifeng was slightly startled. His heart began to waver. Was Qin Nan really afraid of the South Heaven Gate? Mu Mu wanted to say something, but she had no idea what to say, causing her face to turn incredibly unpleasant. Either way, she would not believe it. At that instant, Qin Nan, who had remained silent, calmly glanced at Yu Langyan and brought his fists together at the ancient lightning martial monarch's clone. Senior, there was a little accident. Can you make an exception and let me take the test again? Qin Nan still wanted to join the Anti-Heaven Palace. Otherwise, it would be meaningless for him to join the Anti-Heaven Alliance. The crowd was startled, as they did not expect Qin Nan to want to take the test again. The ancient lightning martial monarch's clone was startled too, who said after a slight hesitation, "If that's the case, I'll let you take the test again." He had been quite impressed with Qin Nan since the beginning. He had high hopes for Qin Nan to join the Anti-Heaven Palace, as he hoped that Qin Nan would be able to turn the tables around. Even though he did not expect Qin Nan to only refine 2 courage crystals, he was willing to give Qin Nan another chance since Qin Nan had asked for it. Besides, the Anti-Heaven Alliance did not say that he could not take the test again. Take the test again? That won't be necessary. An imperious voice could be heard all of a sudden. An illusionary figure appeared on the dojo within the blink of an eye. Its monarch aura surged into the surroundings, causing the hearts of the cultivators to sink. The ancient lightning martial monarch's eyes flickered. Greetings, hall leader illusionist. Yifeng, who was standing among the crowd, immediately brought his fists together. The person was none other than the clone of the illusionist martial monarch, one of the 9 martial monarchs of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. He was also one of the vice leaders of the Anti-Heaven Palace, with the same status as the ancient lightning martial monarch. The cultivators were startled. They did not expect another martial monarch to show up. Hall Master Illusionist, during the test earlier, there was indeed an accident. If this is the second test, I can guarantee you that I'll be able to produce at least 3 courage crystals, Qin Nan said in a deep voice. Ridiculous. The illusionist martial monarch's clone glanced at Qin Nan and said with a hollow laugh, "This is the Pillar of Courage, an ancient, rare artifact. How could it be wrong? Not only do you lack the courage to face the South Heaven Gate, even your martial heart is not firm enough. The truth is the truth. You have to accept it even if you don't believe it." He had purposely scolded Qin Nan, not because he was targeting Qin Nan, but the ancient lightning martial monarch. The ancient lightning martial monarch had high hopes for Qin Nan, thus his scolding was equivalent to scolding the ancient lightning martial monarch. Ancient lightning martial monarch, didn't you have high hopes for Qin Nan? And what was the result? The ancient lightning martial monarch's expression darkened slightly. Hall Leader Illusionist, you're right. The ancient rare artifact won't make a mistake. However, something happened on my side, which led to the current situation. Can't you let me test it again? Qin Nan felt slightly uncomfortable in his heart, but his tone remained normal. The eyes of the illusionist martial monarch's clone instantly turned cold. He did not expect this Qin Nan to be so stubborn. He had already given the order, yet he still wanted to take the test a second time. Was he not treating his identity as the Vice Hall leader seriously? If I say no, it's definitely not possible. The illusionist martial monarch said coldly, I feel like your martial heart has lost its balance. Forget about the Star Aligning Palace, just report to the Dark Shadow Palace. Hearing this, the surrounding crowd was shocked. The Dark Shadow Palace was ranked 3rd among the palaces in the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Although Qin Nan had only refined 2 courage crystals, it was still not enough for him to join the Dark Shadow Palace. He could still go to the Star Aligning Palace and pass the trial there. Despite Qin Nan's personality, he felt extremely uncomfortable hearing the words, "Join the Dark Shadow Palace?" He had put in so much effort to protect the Pillar of Courage, but this was the result he was getting in return? Besides, the ancient lightning martial monarch had never mentioned that the Anti-Heaven Alliance had a rule that a disciple was not allowed to take the test twice. Was it really that difficult to ask him to take the test again? Senior. Qin Nan changed the way he addressed the ancient lightning martial monarch and said in a cold tone, "If there's no rule, why can't I take the test again? Besides, if the result is the same as the previous one, I won't hesitate to go to the Mystic Treasure Palace instead of the Dark Shadow Palace." The Mystic Treasure Palace was the palace with the lowest status among the 4 palaces. End of chapter. Chapter 1194. All the cultivators present were stunned. They did not expect Qin Nan to be so persistent after being rejected 3 times by Hall Leader Illusionist, to the point that he was willing to pay a visit to the Mystic Treasure Palace. Was Qin Nan not convinced, or did something really happen? The illusionist martial monarch stared at Qin Nan for a few breaths' time and said with a hollow laugh, "I don't mind letting you take the test a second time, but if you fail to produce 5 courage crystals this time, you will still be sent to the Mystic Treasure Palace forever." This was the consequence of disobeying his words 3 times in a row. So what if something did happen? Qin Nan had only produced 2 courage crystals the first time. There was no way he would be able to produce 5 courage crystals the second time. Hall Leader Illusionist, you. The ancient lightning martial monarch frowned and was about to scold him. It was highly possible that something had happened to Qin Nan since he was so persistent. However, the illusionist martial monarch's words had no doubt cut off Qin Nan's path. Fine, I'll accept. However, Senior, what if the pillar of courage fails to withstand the pressure and shatters on its own? Qin Nan said with a calm gaze. Everyone would want to stand out in the trial and achieve a law-defying result, thus attracting the attention of the crowd. Even Qin Nan was no exception. However, in Qin Nan's heart, he had already treated himself as a member of the Anti-Heaven Alliance, thus there was no need for him to shatter the Pillar of Courage and bring unnecessary losses to the Anti-Heaven Alliance. According to Qin Nan's plan, he would control his battle intent and produce 7 or 8 courage crystals in the second trial, which would allow him to stand out and protect the Pillar of Courage. However, this illusionist martial monarch had been picking on him, thus he had no choice but to retaliate. The ancient lightning martial monarch and the rest of the cultivators were wondering if they had heard it wrong. What did Qin Nan mean by that? Was he planning to shatter the Pillar of Courage? The illusionist martial monarch was startled, before he burst out laughing after a while. Ha 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 ha, the Pillar of Courage failed to withstand your courage to attack the South Heaven Gate and shattered on its own? If that is the case, not only will I bear the responsibility, I will also reward you greatly. Unless the Alliance Master personally came to test it and shatter the Pillar of Courage, that would be more likely. Qin Nan? It was impossible. Senior, you said it yourself. The corners of Qin Nan's mouth curled up, and his figure flashed, landing on the Pillar of Courage. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page, before placing your palm on it. Tsk Moo, did you see that? This was Qin Nan's true colors. He did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, and did not know how to appreciate favors. Let's not talk about whether the Pillar of Courage would make a mistake. Did he want to shatter the Pillar of Courage? In my opinion, he should have gotten 2 courage crystals this time. Among the cultivators, Yulangyan sneered with a face full of disdain. This Qin Nan really doesn't know the difference between heaven and earth. In my opinion, he just can't accept the truth and has to try again. When he tries again and sees the result, he will give up. The cultivators and the experts in the hall collected their thoughts and discussed among themselves. No one was optimistic about Qin Nan's chances. The ancient lightning martial monarch let out a sigh in his heart seeing how the situation had developed. He glanced at Qin Nan and remained silent. Only Moo clenched her fists tightly. Qin Nan, if you dare to say it, you must be able to do it, right? Whoosh! At that instant, a beam of white light slowly floated out from the Pillar of Courage, which swiftly transformed into a courage crystal. Every cultivator who saw this scene was completely stunned. One. And it was 1 less than the previous one? Haha, Qin Nan, is this the reason why you're so stubborn? The illusionist martial monarch burst out laughing. I already told you that your martial heart is unbalanced. This courage crystal is the best proof that. However, before he could finish, a second white glow was emitted from the Pillar of Courage, which turned into a second courage crystal. The illusionist martial monarch's voice halted as his eyes widened. The ancient lightning martial monarch, Yulangyan, and the rest of the cultivators were astounded. When the Pillar of Courage turned into a courage crystal, it meant that the trial had come to an end. Why would there be a second courage crystal now? Senior, this is the second one. Qin Nan's calm voice appeared. As soon as he finished speaking, another white light appeared on the Pillar of Courage and turned into the third courage crystal. Senior, this is the third one. As Qin Nan finished his sentence, the fourth white ray sprang into the sky, which transformed into a courage crystal. Senior, this is the fifth one. Senior, this is the sixth one. Senior, this is the... At that instant, the illusionist martial monarch was stunned. The ancient lightning martial monarch was stunned. Yulangyan and the rest of the cultivators were dumbfounded. The seventh courage crystal. Qin Nan had produced the seventh courage crystal. The result had already surpassed some of the martial monarchs. Senior, this is the 8th one. Senior, this is the 9th one. Senior, this, however, that was not the end of it. Following Qin Nan's voice, several white glows were emitted, which turned into courage crystals. At that instant, the illusionist martial monarch, the ancient lightning martial monarch, and the rest of the cultivators felt their hearts exploding. The 11th one. A total of 11 courage crystals. Even the ancient lightning martial monarch only had 9 courage crystals, but Qin Nan had already surpassed him by 2. How brave was he to go against the South Heaven Gate? However, that was not the end. Senior, this is the 12th one. Senior, this is the 13th one. Senior, this is the 14th one. Senior, Qin Nan's voice continued to appear as more courage crystals were produced. The process finally came to a stop when the 20th one was produced. Meanwhile, the illusionist martial monarch, the ancient lightning martial monarch, Yulangyan, and the others were stunned by the sight before them, as if they had received a great shock. Senior, I'm sorry, Qin Nan suddenly said. The illusionist martial monarch was startled. Sorry? Could it be? Break. Following the voice, a tremendous battle intent burst out from his body. This time, Qin Nan did not hold back. He continued to unleash the battle intent. The huge pillar of courage suddenly blossomed with a boundless white light. Not only that, but it continued to increase until the white light turned into a blinding golden light. Countless cracks started to crawl all over the pillar of courage. Bang! Following a deafening explosion, the pillar of courage exploded into pieces. A mystical aura swept across the dojo and swept into the sky. End of chapter. Chapter 1195. It shattered. The pillar of courage shattered? Damn, did the pillar of courage really shatter? The ancient lightning martial monarch, the illusionist martial monarch, the cultivators, and the experts were dumbfounded. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined such a scene before them. What did it mean that the pillar of courage had shattered? It meant that Qin Nan was not intimidated by the South Heaven Gate at all. That was the South Heaven Gate, the top artifact of the South Heaven sacred ground, which had stood firmly in the Kanglan continent for tens of thousands of years, suppressing the entire half-god region. Its power was unimaginable. How did Qin Nan do it? Well done. The ancient lightning martial monarch collected his thoughts and uttered the word great 3 times in a row. He turned toward the illusionist martial monarch and said, Hall leader illusionist, is Qin Nan's result acceptable? The illusionist martial monarch wore an unpleasant expression as he said, The result is indeed not bad. As the vice hall leader of the Anti-Heaven Palace, I'll keep my word. I'll be responsible for the compensation for the Pillar of Courage. After saying this, he glanced at Qin Nan with a cold gaze, before he flung his sleeves and left the place. It was useless for him to say anything further. Cultivator Yulangyan, didn't you say that only 2 pillars can be produced in the second round? Mu Mu glanced at Yulangyan and said calmly. This. Yulangyan's face instantly reddened. Everything that happened before him was like a slap to his face, and it was exceptionally loud. Mu Mu was too lazy to say anything further. Her gaze landed on Qin Nan's figure with glittering eyes. Everyone, the result of the second round is out. Qin Nan has come first. Due to Qin Nan's performance in the first and second rounds, he will be rewarded with 200,000 contribution points. The ancient lightning martial monarch glanced at Qin Nan and said with a smile. The cultivators on the dojo did not react too much, but the experts in the sky were envious of Qin Nan. These new disciples might not know, but they were well aware of how important contribution points were in the Anti-Heaven Palace. As long as one had enough contribution points, even changing one's fate would not be a problem. 200,000 contribution points was quite a huge sum, as he would need to kill 20 important people of the South Heaven sacred ground to earn them. Qin Nan, you have 7 martial trees, and you have the Southern Heaven Gate. With such courage, as the Vice Hall Master, I hereby invite you to join the Anti-Heaven Palace. I will also grant you the title of Golden Elder, one of the 5 great elders. Do you agree? The eyes of the ancient lightning martial monarch flickered as he spoke. Golden Elder? One of the 5 great elders. This Qin Nan has soared to the heavens. In the palace in the sky, the expressions of the experts changed once again. In the Anti-Heaven Alliance, below the Hall Master was the Vice Hall Master, followed by the 5 great elders of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and the deacons. If it were any other palace, it would not be too difficult to become one of the 5 great elders. However, as one of the 5 great elders of the Anti-Heaven Palace, their status was completely different. The illusionist martial monarch who had returned to the Anti-Heaven Palace harumphed coldly. Even though he did not want Qin Nan to become one of the 5 great elders, he had no choice but to stop Qin Nan from becoming one of the 5 great elders. One of the 5 great elders? Qin Nan frowned slightly. Yifeng, who was not far away, immediately transmitted his voice. Qin Nan, accept it. Once you become one of the 5 great elders, not only will you be given lots of benefits, you will also have great authority in terms of information, the chance to alter your destiny, etc. Information? Qin Nan's eyes flickered. Now that he had successfully joined the Anti-Heaven Alliance, his next step was to search for the pieces of the Kanglan tree. Searching for the pieces on his own was like searching for a needle in a haystack, thus it would be troublesome. However, if he asked the people of the Dark Shadow Palace to keep an eye out for any information related to the pieces of the Kanglan tree, it would greatly increase his chances of finding the pieces. On second thought, it was not a bad idea to accept the offer. Thank you, Hall Master Ancient Lightning, I won't let you down. Qin Nan brought his fists together and said. Very well. The Ancient Lightning martial monarch nodded and glanced at the crowd. Yu Langyan, you're ranked 2nd in the trial. I'll now reward you with 30,000 contribution points and invite you to join the Anti-Heaven Palace as an elder. Following this, it was time to arrange the disciples for the trial. Apart from a small portion of the disciples who had joined the Anti-Heaven Palace, the rest of the disciples were assigned to the other 3 palaces. After the trial came to an end, the disciples were led away by the people of the 4 palaces, thus bringing the incident to an end. That being said, the incident that had taken place in the trial was soon spread across the entire Anti-Heaven Alliance. Qin Nan's reaction was, even if he did not shatter the Pillar of Courage, he would still attract a lot of attention after joining the Anti-Heaven Alliance. However, after shattering the Pillar of Courage this time around, many people had a whole new level of respect for him, saving him a lot of trouble. A while later, Qin Nan, Mu Mu, and Yifeng followed the ancient lightning martial monarch's clone to the Anti-Heaven Palace. The ancient lightning martial monarch seemed to be in a good mood as he explained the situation to Qin Nan, allowing him to learn more about the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Among the 4 palaces floating in the air, the leading one was the Anti-Heaven Palace. There were 3 vice leaders in the Anti-Heaven Palace, who were the ancient lightning martial monarch, the illusionist martial monarch, and the martial monarch Rongtian, who all lived in the Anti-Heaven Palace. As for the 5 elders, deacons, and disciples, they lived in the smaller palaces surrounding the Anti-Heaven Palace. The palaces were arranged in different levels, with a clear hierarchy. Qin Nan, this is the scroll of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. You should go back and learn more about it. The ancient lightning martial monarch said with a calm smile. Besides, the Anti-Heaven Palace will be hosting a banquet tonight. Everyone above the rank of deacon is required to attend. You should prepare yourself. Banquet? Qin Nan was startled. It was his first time hearing that joining a faction would have a banquet. That's right, it's the rule set by the alliance leader. Once a batch of people joins the anti-heaven palace, they must hold a banquet and drink 3 cups of blood wine. It implies that from today onward, we are all one big family. The ancient lightning martial monarch suddenly transmitted his voice. You should be careful of the remaining 4 elders, as they are the disciples of the illusionist martial monarch. Qin Nan immediately came to a realization upon hearing this. The ancient lightning martial monarch had been taking good care of him. It was most likely that he wanted him to keep the 4 elders in check. The illusionist martial monarch was picking on him because of the ancient lightning martial monarch. Although the anti-heaven alliance was different from the other factions, it was still full of conflicts. Following this, Qin Nan chatted with the ancient lightning martial monarch's clone for a while, before the ancient lightning martial monarch left. Meanwhile, Qin Nan, Mu Mu, and Yi Feng returned to their own palace. However, to Qin Nan's surprise, at that instant, in the rift of the half-god region, an ancient pagoda floated in the air. No one was aware of what was going on. Magical hair, am I right? A young man said with a calm smile. He was the master of the martial serendipity pavilion. In front of the young man stood an illusionary figure with a terrifying aura. It was none other than the will of the magical hair sword god. End of chapter. Chapter 1196. That's right, he's not afraid of the South Heaven Gate. The magical hair sword god's will said, why didn't he achieve the martial monarch realm? When he was trying to achieve the martial monarch realm, the South Heaven Gate allowed a South Heaven spirit envoy to enter. It must be related to that. The young man of the martial serendipity pavilion said in a deep voice. Oh, I'll head south within 3 years. Your plan is to wait for him to achieve the martial monarch realm and achieve the martial god realm. It doesn't really matter to me. The magical hair sword god said calmly. That being said, if the plan fails, why don't you team up with us? The young man of the martial serendipity pavilion said. Why don't you team up with me? With your help, it'll be much easier to shatter the door, and we'll have a great chance too. The magical hair sword god said with a calm smile. The young man of the martial serendipity pavilion was left speechless. He did not expect to be recruited by the magical hair sword god instead. I can see that you're not willing, so there's no need to talk about it. I'm too lazy to wait, and it's not fair either. If the kid can achieve the martial monarch realm, I'll lend him a hand. The will of the magical hair sword god dissipated on its own after uttering these words. Achieve the martial monarch realm? The young man of the martial serendipity pavilion wore a wry smile. The magical hair sword god's intention was obvious. Unless Qin Nan could achieve the martial monarch realm on his own, how could anyone achieve the martial monarch realm on their own in the current Kanglan continent? However, there might be a glimmer of hope. What I saw in the past is not wrong. Qin Nan, I won't be able to help you for now. It's all up to you now. The young man of the martial serendipity pavilion mumbled to himself. He did not ask anything after Qin Nan failed to achieve the martial monarch realm, as he firmly believed in what he had seen in the past. It was the reason why he had been helping Qin Nan. There was still a glimmer of hope. It all depended on Qin Nan if he could turn the hope into a reality, a miracle. Meanwhile, in the 7 luminaries' flying sword, in the anti-heaven alliance, Qin Nan thanked Yi Feng. After chatting with Mu Mu, he immersed himself in the scroll of the anti-heaven alliance. Originally, he only wanted to have a rough understanding of it, but he didn't expect that when he saw the content inside, he would be completely attracted. First, the overall strength of the anti-heaven alliance. Below the 3 gods and 9 martial monarchs, there were a total of 132 peak martial ancestor cultivators, 1,321 peak martial ancestor cultivators, and over 600 martial sacred and martial highness cultivators. Secondly, in the anti-heaven alliance, Both the vice leaders and the martial monarchs were required to perform the ritual every 2 months. Most of the quests were targeted at the South Heaven Sacred Ground, as they were assigned by the Stargaze Palace and the Alliance leader. By carrying out missions, one could obtain contribution points and various other benefits. That being said, that was not what attracted Qin Nan's attention. The most important thing was that the contribution points were extremely useful in the Anti-Heaven Alliance. With enough contribution points, one could purchase lots of valuable artifacts, information, and ancient secret. They could even acquire some destiny-altering items. For example, by spending 2 million contribution points, one could acquire something that could alter one's destiny to a 6th-grade Tian-ranked martial spirit. How rich is this magical hair sword god? Qin Nan smacked his lips. Everyone knew that the magical hair sword god was responsible for all the treasures of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Spending 5 million contribution points to fulfill a reasonable wish of the magical hair sword god? Qin Nan was shocked as he read the content. If he had that many contribution points, wouldn't he be able to ask the magical hair sword god to help him search for the pieces of the Kanglan tree? With the magical hair sword god's help, the time he needed to search for the pieces of the Kanglan tree would greatly increase. That being said, it's not that easy to earn contribution points. Killing an important person of the South Heaven Sacred Ground would only give me 10,000 contribution points. Killing a martial monarch would only give me 1,000,000 contribution points. Qin Nan soon calmed his thoughts. It was unrealistic to ask the magical hair sword god to help him, but he could earn some contribution points while searching for the pieces of the Kanglan tree. Following this, Qin Nan continued to read the scroll. It took him 3 hours to learn the names of the elders of the Anti-Heaven Alliance, the rules, and the rewards and punishments of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. At that instant, the 7 luminaries' sword talisman in Qin Nan's hand emitted a glow. Qin Nan scanned it with his divine sense. It was a message from the ancient lightning martial monarch. The entrance banquet had begun. Upon seeing this, Qin Nan immediately flew out of the palace and headed to the Anti-Heaven Palace. Before he entered the palace, he could hear many voices, resulting in a lively atmosphere. When Qin Nan entered the palace, the noise in the palace became much softer as the crowd gathered their gazes onto him. So that's Qin Nan? Impressive, my eye technique can't see through his disguise. Many voices could be heard. They were inspecting Qin Nan. As soon as Qin Nan entered the palace, he secretly activated his left eye and scanned the crowd. The entire Anti-Heaven Palace was over a few thousand zhang long, filled with a strong presence of qi and a pleasant smell. At the front of the palace were 3 golden dragon chairs, with the illusionist martial monarch's clone sitting in the middle and the ancient lightning martial monarch's clone on the right. As for martial monarch Rongtian, he was not present yet. Apart from the 2 martial monarchs, there were 23 cultivators in the palace. Qin Nan's eyes flickered. He saw 4 people sitting in front of the white jade chair on the right. Although their cultivations were the same as the others, which was the peak martial ancestor realm, they were significantly stronger than the others. The reason being that 3 of them had 7th-grade Tian-ranked martial spirits, while 1 had an 8th-grade Tian-ranked martial spirit. On top of that, they were also well-versed in body tempering, eye techniques, spirit arts, etc. Most importantly, even though they were trying their best to conceal their presence, Qin Nan was still able to sense their hostility. They must be the 4 disciples of the illusionist martial monarch, Elder Wei Ming, Elder Tsun Wu, Elder Lu Feiyan, and Elder Lu Shui, right? Qin Nan murmured. Qin Nan, you're the 5th elder. You should take the 5th seat. The ancient lightning martial monarch's clone said. Under the crowd's gaze, Qin Nan brought his fists together and went to his seat. Following this, a few more elders and deacons arrived. Everyone is here. Serve the wine. The illusionist martial monarch said. Soon, several cultivators came forward with cups made of blue jade, each with 3 bowls in front of them. Each bowl was filled with a spiritual wine that looked like fresh blood, with a strong presence of qi. Anti-Heaven Alliance, Anti-South Heaven, after drinking this wine, we shall share the glory and seek revenge together. The illusionist martial monarch and the ancient lightning martial monarch raised their cups and yelled. Their voices seemed to have some sort of magic, which stirred the blood of the crowd in the hall. Share the glory and seek revenge together. The crowd raised their cups and drank the wine. One cup after another, the 3 cups were emptied. The 3 cups of blood wine were extremely strong. With the help of the wine, the atmosphere of the place became lively. The few cultivators who had just joined the Anti-Heaven Palace soon became familiar with the cultivators around them. Stick to the plan. The illusionist martial monarch glanced at Qin Nan before transmitting his voice to Wei Ming, Sun Wu, Lu Feiyan, and Lu Shui. A glint flashed through the eyes of the 4 people when they heard those words. End of chapter. Chapter 1197. Elder Qin Nan, it's your first time here. As your seniors, it's only right for us to have a drink with you. Here are the Jade Top Bliss wines that we have prepared for you. Please accept them and have a drink with us. Among the 4 elders, the one wearing a red robe with an imperious appearance, Wei Ming rose from his seat and said in a loud voice. He flicked his finger, causing 10 jade jars to appear in front of Qin Nan, each emitting a strong wine aroma. Jade Top Bliss wines? That's some good wine. A single jar alone costs 8,000 contribution points. The other elders and deacons were astounded. That being said, they clearly knew that Qin Nan was on the ancient lightning martial monarch's side, while the 4 elders were on the illusionist martial monarch's side. They were surely up to something by inviting Qin Nan to a drink. The illusionist martial monarch wore a smile on his face. The ancient lightning martial monarch's eyes glistened slightly, but he did not say anything. Qin Nan raised his eyebrows slightly as he scanned the wine with his left eye of the divine god of battle. He let out a hollow laugh in his heart. These 4 elders were up to no good indeed, as they had done something to the wine. Besides, they were aware of how powerful his eye technique was, thus they had used something special. Even his left eye of the divine god of battle could only detect a strange ripple. Hee, could it be that Elder Qin Nan is looking down on us or the wine? Wei Ming said with a fake smile. Since the 4 elders are so kind, how could I not accept it? Thank you, 4 elders, Qin Nan said calmly. The 4 elders had come prepared. They must have expected him to have 7 martial trees, thus they knew the wine would not harm him. However, little did they know, the number of martial trees in his body was not 7, but 9. He could easily suppress the poison or the wine. If the poison was too terrifying, even the illusionist martial monarch would not dare to use it. Hearing this, the eyes of Wei Ming and the others flickered with joy. The illusionist martial monarch chuckled coldly in his heart. Just as Qin Nan had expected, they were clearly aware that it was impossible to make Qin Nan drunk with his cultivation. Therefore, they had used a type of ancient poison called the heart-weakening liquid. Even martial monarchs with eye techniques would find it extremely difficult to tell the difference. And this kind of heart-weakening elixir was beneficial to Qin Nan's physical body. Cultivation and so on would not have any effect. They would only quietly invade Qin Nan's sea of consciousness and affect Qin Nan's mind. If Qin Nan were to drink the 10 jars of the Jade Top Elysian wine, he would go crazy for at least 5 days, causing him to lose his reputation in the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Elder Qin Nan is indeed straightforward. I'll drink first to show my respect. Wei Ming grabbed a bottle of wine and drained it directly. Boundless wine energy spread out, making light popping sounds. Thank you, Elder Wei Ming. Qin Nan emptied the bottle too. As the wine exploded, it was refined by the 9 martial trees. The copper mirror in Qin Nan's sea of consciousness suddenly emitted a faint glow, illuminating his sea of consciousness. Could it be that the wine is targeting my sea of consciousness? Qin Nan was startled. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he was. Following this, his face flickered with a strange expression. Why would the wine be targeting his sea of consciousness instead of anything else? Elder Qin Nan is young and talented. Allow me to offer you a toast. Sun Wu rose to his feet and raised the bottle. Elder Sun Wu is being too courteous. Qin Nan did not reject the offer and finished the bottle. Elder Qin Nan. Following this, Lu Feiyan rose to his feet. The elders and deacons exchanged glances with one another. Were the 4 elders planning to make Qin Nan drunk to teach him a lesson? For elders, what do you mean by this? The ancient lightning martial monarch said with an expressionless face. Hall leader Ancient Lightning, everyone knows that Elder Qin Nan has 7 martial trees. How could the wine be enough to make him drunk? Don't overthink it. Hall leader Illusionist immediately said. He purposely ordered the 4 elders to take turns toasting Qin Nan, to create an illusion that the 4 elders were trying to get Qin Nan drunk. When the elders and deacons heard this, they all felt that it was very polite. The ancient lightning martial monarch let out a hollow laugh. He would not believe the excuse. However, before the ancient lightning martial monarch could speak, Qin Nan smilingly said, Hall leader Ancient Lightning, Hall leader Illusionist is right. Don't worry, I won't have any problem drinking the wine. The ancient lightning martial monarch frowned. He wanted to say something, but let out a sigh in the end. The illusionist martial monarch's grin grew thicker upon seeing this. It seemed like this Qin Nan had been tricked. Following this, under the crowd's gaze, Qin Nan and the 4 elders finished the jars of wine one after another. However, Qin Nan had already finished 10 jars, while the 4 elders only drank 5 jars each. At that instant, Qin Nan's body was emitting a faint hint of alcohol. As for the 4 elders, they were even more tipsy. After all, the Jade Top Elysian wine was no ordinary wine. Still not acting up? Is it because of the martial trees? The illusionist martial monarch and the 4 elders exchanged glances with one another. Even the strongest geniuses would be affected by the heart-weakening liquid after drinking 10 jars. However, they had already expected this to happen, thus they were prepared for it. Elder Qin Nan, let's drink to our heart's content. Here are 10 jars of Jade Top Elysian, I'll give you a toast. The only female among the 4 elders, Lu Shui, winked at Qin Nan and handed him 10 jars. She then took out a jar for herself and said, Another 10 jars? The elders and deacons present were all secretly shocked. 20 jars would cost a total of 160,000 contribution points. Thank you, Elder Lu Shui. Qin Nan continued to gulp down the contents of the jar, as if he was unaware of it. Elder Qin Nan. Wei Ming soon rose from his seat. It was as if everything had started all over again, as the 4 elders took turns toasting Qin Nan. As for Qin Nan, he did not reject any of them. As time gradually passed, the tipsiness on Qin Nan's body grew stronger. As for the 4 elders, they began to execute their monarch arts to suppress the tipsiness. When Qin Nan finished the 10 jars, the surrounding elders and deacons were astounded. As expected of the 7 martial trees, he was perfectly fine after drinking 20 jars of Jade Top Elysian. The ancient lightning martial monarch let out a relieved sigh. As for the illusionist martial monarch and the 4 elders, their expressions changed. What was going on? Why wasn't the heart-weakening liquid acting up? Normally, no matter how powerful the 7 martial trees were, wouldn't it at least react after drinking 20 jars of Jade Top Elysian? Elders, thank you for your help today, but this Jade Top Elysian is quite nice indeed. Do you have any more? Qin Nan brought his fists together and said with a smile. Drink with him. The illusionist martial monarch transmitted his voice with a cold look. He would not believe that the 7 martial trees were undefeatable. End of chapter. Chapter 1198. Yes, yes, of course, we must drink to our heart's content today. Wei Ming wore his trademark fake smile as he took out 10 jars of Jade Top Elysian from his summer ring. Elder Wei Ming is so straightforward, allow me to give you a toast. Qin Nan's eyes flickered as he took out a jar and emptied it. Elder Qin Nan. Sun Wu, Lu Shui, and Lu Feiyan rose from their seat. At that instant, it felt like everything had happened once again. However, unlike the previous 2 times, despite their outstanding cultivations, the 4 elders had no choice but to use their powerful monarch arts to suppress the effects of the wine from the jars of Jade Top Bliss. On the other hand, not only did Qin Nan not use any monarch arts, his aura even grew stronger. It was obvious that his cultivation had improved. Not long after, the 10 jars of Jade Top Elysian were emptied once again. Such an impressive alcohol tolerance. As expected of Elder Qin Nan, the surrounding elders and deacons were startled. Up until now, Qin Nan had drunk 30 jars of Jade Top Elysian. If they were in his shoes, it would be impressive if they could drink 15 jars. The illusionist martial monarch and the 4 elders wore gloomy looks. What exactly was going on? Did the heart-weakening liquid have no effect on Qin Nan? Master, what should we do now? Wei Ming, Sun Wu, and the others felt troubled. Even though each of them had only drunk a few jars, they would have to use a great effort to suppress the alcohol. Ha ha ha, as expected. For elders, do you have any more? Qin Nan glanced at them and burst out laughing. Following this, he frowned as he became aware of something. Drink, keep drinking with him. If he drinks another 10 jars, he won't be able to hold on any longer. The illusionist martial monarch who was hesitating immediately transmitted his voice to the 4 elders after noticing Qin Nan's reaction. They had already consumed 30 jars of Jade Top Elysian. How could they let go of such a rare opportunity? All right. Hearing this, Wei Ming, Sun Wu, and the other 2 looked at Qin Nan and clenched their teeth, their killing intent surging. As the 5 great elders, disciples of great emperors, and geniuses on the god ranking, they refused to believe that they could not subdue a mere Qin Nan. Elder Qin Nan, since you want to drink, I'll treat you to it, the illusionist martial monarch said and flicked his finger. 10 jars of Jade Top Bliss landed in front of Qin Nan, while the rest landed in front of the 4 elders. Thank you, Palace Master. Elder Wei Ming, I'll give you a toast. Qin Nan cupped his hands and smiled. He grabbed a bottle and drank it directly. His aura was still the same. Elder Sun Wu, after finishing the bottle, Qin Nan did not hesitate and picked up another bottle. What was different from the previous 3 times was that it was basically the 4 elders who came to respect him. But now it was all Qin Nan's turn. Time gradually passed. The jars of Jade Top Bliss were emptied one after another. After the 4 elders finished 2 jars, a series of explosions took place in their bodies. The alcohol lingered in the air, causing them to be startled. They immediately performed hand seals and executed powerful monarch arts to suppress the alcohol. As for Qin Nan, he was perfectly fine as usual. A while later, the 10 jars of Jade Top Bliss were emptied by Qin Nan once again. Holy crap! 40 jars of Jade Top Bliss. Isn't Elder Qin Nan's alcohol tolerance a little too terrifying? The surrounding elders and deacons could no longer sit still when they saw this. They could not help but exclaim. The illusionist martial monarch and the 4 elders wore twisted expressions. How was this possible? Even a martial monarch would lose his mind after drinking so much heart-weakening liquid, right? Elder Qin Nan, are you sure you're fine after drinking 40 jars of Jade Top Bliss? The illusionist martial monarch took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down as he asked. Wei Ming, Sun Wu, and the others stared at Qin Nan too. Hall Leader Illusionist, for elders you might not know this, but I've practiced a unique technique that makes my divine sense as solid as a mountain. That's why I'm fine after drinking 40 jars of Jade Top Bliss. Qin Nan's lips curled upward. You can drink more after stabilizing your divine sense? Who would have thought that would happen? It seems like I'll have to prepare in advance the next time I'm drinking with someone. When the surrounding elders and deacons heard this, their spirits were lifted, and their faces were filled with surprise. They initially thought Qin Nan was able to drink so much because of the 7 martial trees. The ancient lightning martial monarch was aware of something after hearing this. He glanced at the illusionist martial monarch and the others with a disdainful look. The illusionist martial monarch and the 4 elders were startled. When they collected their thoughts, their faces darkened as they almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Stabilizing his divine sense to increase his alcohol tolerance? Increase my ass. It was obvious that Qin Nan's words were telling them that their plan had been exposed, and that his divine sense was extremely powerful, thus their heart-weakening liquid was useless against him. The illusionist martial monarch, in particular, recalled Qin Nan's frown. He initially thought that the heart-weakening liquid was working, but on second thought, it was obvious that Qin Nan was purposely trying to trick him. Hall Leader Illusionist, for elders, I finally realize that there's still some Jade Top Bliss left? Qin Nan purposely asked. The illusionist martial monarch and the 4 elders' expressions froze instantly. Drink with you? Who would be dumb enough to drink with you? They had already wasted 40 jars of Jade Top Bliss, which meant they had lost over 200,000 contribution points. They did not want to lose any more. Elder Qin Nan is indeed a great drinker. I don't think there's any need for us to continue drinking. I have something else to attend to, so I'll excuse myself. The illusionist martial monarch rose to his feet and forced a smile before leaving the place. Elder Qin Nan will be leaving too. The 4 elders rose to their feet and followed behind the illusionist martial monarch with smiles on their faces. If they stayed any longer, they would most likely vomit blood due to the frustration. The elders and deacons in the hall looked at each other in dismay. At this time, they were keenly aware of the strange atmosphere. Ha ha ha, Elder Qin Nan, well done! The ancient lightning martial monarch burst out laughing. Even though he was clueless about what had happened, he could easily guess that the illusionist martial monarch and his crew had failed to set up Qin Nan, resulting in a double loss. Following this, the feast continued. 3 hours later, the crowd finally took their leave. The only thing worth mentioning was that many cultivators who were fond of drinking had gone back to train their divine sense. When they were having a drinking contest with the others, they surprisingly discovered that their tolerance for alcohol had improved significantly after their divine sense had improved. As such, they were even more impressed by Qin Nan. Now that I've secured my position, it's time for me to pay a visit to the Dark Shadow Palace. Qin Nan returned to his palace and made up his mind after a slight ponder. As he rose to his feet, an unexpected occurrence took place. An ancient ball of red light suddenly exploded out of his chest, spinning rapidly as it madly converged. End of chapter. Chapter 1199. In just a few breaths' time, the ancient red glow turned into a mysterious red rune. Qin Nan was slightly startled. He had seen the rune on Ning Jianfei and the others before. It was the rune of the god ranking. Why would the rune of the god ranking appear on him all of a sudden? Qin Nan, erased from the monarch ranking, entered the god ranking as an exception, ranked 8001st. An ancient voice suddenly appeared in Qin Nan's mind. An exception to enter the god ranking? Could this voice be the spirit of the god ranking? Qin Nan's eyes flickered with astonishment. The scene was too strange. Just like the monarch ranking of the Middle Continent, Those who wanted to enter the God ranking would have to undergo a trial. However, the Anti-Heaven Alliance was different from the other factions. There were no benefits to being listed on the God ranking, thus Qin Nan had never thought of joining it for the time being. But now, the God ranking had taken the initiative to make an exception and allowed him to join it? Normally, even though he had surpassed the rules of cultivation, the God ranking would not give him any special treatment as he had yet to achieve the martial monarch realm. There must be something fishy going on. The spirit of the God ranking must be planning something. Forget it, I won't be able to figure it out in a short period of time. I should focus on finding the pieces of the Kanglan tree as soon as possible. Qin Nan's expression changed slightly, before he calmed his thoughts. Only by achieving the martial monarch realm and mastering the true monarch force would he be able to resist the schemes of the monarch ranking, God ranking, or the South Heaven Gate. Time to go to the Dark Shadow Palace. Qin Nan did not waste any more time. With a kick, he flew toward the Dark Shadow Palace. Unlike the Anti-Heaven Palace, the disciples of the Anti-Heaven Alliance had to pay contribution points to enter the Dark Shadow Palace to search for information. For example, if one wanted to find some secrets, they would have to enter the Hall of Elders under the Dark Shadow Palace, which would cost them 30,000 contribution points. If one wanted to find some ancient secrets, they would have to pay 50,000 contribution points to enter the Hall of Elders. However, for people like Qin Nan who had achieved a certain status in the Anti-Heaven Palace, they were not required to pay the contribution points. Furthermore, as one of the 5 great elders of the Anti-Heaven Palace, Qin Nan could enter the Dark Shadow Palace directly. Several hundred breaths later, Qin Nan entered the Dark Shadow Palace. The spacious hall was slightly dark, and the surrounding walls were lit with blue candles. In front of the hall was an old man sitting with his legs crossed. His eyes were tightly shut, and when he sensed someone approaching, the old man immediately reacted. Only then did he slowly open his eyes. So it's Elder Qin Nan. I wonder what brings you here to the Dark Shadow Palace? The old man said slowly with a hoarse voice. This old man was one of the 5 great elders of the Dark Shadow Palace. Senior, I'm here to see if there are any pieces of the Kanglan tree in the Half-God region or the Middle Continent. Qin Nan brought his fists together and asked. Qin Nan had made the decision after careful consideration. After all, even if the authorities knew about it, they would only guess that he was trying to merge the 9 martial trees instead of trying to achieve the martial monarch realm on his own, thus it would not make much of a difference. A piece of the Kanglan tree? The old man was startled. You're looking for that? Senior, what's wrong? Qin Nan frowned. It seems like Elder Qin Nan has no idea. The old man wore a smile as he said, There's a piece of the Kanglan tree in the 5th floor of the Mystic Treasure Palace of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. If you need it, you can go to the Mystic Treasure Palace. The Mystic Treasure Palace has a piece of the Kanglan tree? Qin Nan's eyes flickered with astonishment. He did not expect the Mystic Treasure Palace of the Anti-Heaven Alliance to have a piece of the Kanglan tree. Senior, apart from the piece of the Kanglan tree in the Mystic Treasure Palace, is there any other piece of the Dark Shadow Palace? Qin Nan calmed his thoughts and asked. The piece that Zhang Shaoxian had given him had only altered the auras of the 9 trees. Therefore, it was unlikely that a piece or 2 would be enough to merge the 9 trees. Not yet, but I'll ask the disciples to keep an eye out for it. I'll let you know if there's any news. The old man said. Thanks, Senior. Qin Nan brought his fists together and expressed his gratitude, before heading straight to the Mystic Treasure Palace. Looking from afar, one could see that within the 4 halls of the Spirit Treasure Palace, there was a faint trace of spiritual energy. One after another, cultivators were flying into the palace. The Mystic Treasure Palace was different from the Dark Shadow Palace. Anyone could enter it regardless of their cultivation. With enough contribution points, they could exchange for many things. As soon as Qin Nan entered the palace, many gazes were immediately attracted to him. Elder Qin Nan. Greetings, Elder Qin Nan. The cultivators were startled. They quickly brought their fists together and said, Hee, Elder Qin Nan, what brings you to the Mystic Treasure Palace? A voice could be heard, who turned out to be Wei Ming with a fake smile. Wei Ming was not only a member of the Anti-Heaven Palace. He was one of the 5 great elders, one of the vice leaders of the Mystic Treasure Palace, in charge of the important matters of the Mystic Treasure Palace. He showed himself as soon as he saw Qin Nan. Hall leader Wei Ming, from what I know, the Mystic Treasure Palace has a piece of the Kanglan tree, right? Can I take a look? Qin Nan asked straight away. A piece of the Kanglan tree? Are you interested? Wei Ming was startled. Before his eyes flickered coldly as a thought crossed his mind. If Elder Qin Nan is interested, I'll bring you there. Saying this, Wei Ming turned around and headed deeper into the palace. Qin Nan's eyes flickered with doubts. He did not expect Wei Ming to be so cooperative. Or was he planning something else? Qin Nan shook his head to clear his thoughts before following behind the man. A piece of the Kanglan tree? Isn't that on the 5th floor? Isn't the 5th floor? Shoo, lower your voice. The eyes of the cultivators in the palace flickered as they whispered among themselves. As for Qin Nan, he followed Wei Ming and soon arrived at the 5th floor. The entrance was encapsulated by a mystical glow with countless patterns of deities and demons. Qin Nan scanned the glow with his left eye and was astounded. His left eye was unable to peek through the glow. Elder Qin Nan, it's here. You can enter with this wooden badge. According to the rules, I won't be able to accompany you. Wei Ming handed Qin Nan a wooden badge. Thanks. Qin Nan glanced at Wei Ming and received the badge. He immediately turned around and walked toward the light barrier. Qin Nan, I failed to trick you when we were drinking, but I didn't expect you to come to me on your own accord. I'd like to see what you're going to do next. Wei Ming stared at Qin Nan's back with a cold grin. Only martial monarchs were allowed to enter the 5th floor. The reason being that there were many terrifying artifacts inside, whose auras could not be withstood by anyone below the martial monarch realm. As such, when Qin Nan asked to see the piece of the Kanglan tree, Wei Ming took the initiative to lead the way. After all, if Qin Nan was seriously injured, Wei Ming could simply say that he could not reject Qin Nan's request. However, Qin Nan was completely unaware of it. With the badge, Qin Nan entered the 5th floor through the barrier. As soon as he entered, several terrifying auras were awakened in the spacious palace. End of chapter. Chapter 1200. Qin Nan was startled. He quickly raised his head and glanced ahead. The hall covered an area with a circumference of over 400 zhang. It was built with some kind of ancient or that was red and blue in color. The walls were lined with endless candles that lit up the place. The hall was filled with artifacts of different sizes, shapes, and auras. With a rough glance, there were at least a few thousand of them. Each of them was encapsulated with a terrifying sword intent. Even a martial monarch would not be able to shatter the sword intent with brute force. Qin Nan's eyes were filled with astonishment after taking a glance. The Dharma treasures displayed here were all extraordinary. For example, there was a broken ancient sword in the corner. It seemed ordinary, but it contained a strong martial monarch intent, as if a sword monarch was still alive. In another corner, there was a huge halberd lying quietly. It emitted a sharp aura, as if it could penetrate the heavens and earth with a single blow. There was also an ancient bell, a chain that seemed to have come from the depths of the void, an ancient fan with a hint of god intent, a fiery stone that contained a 7th-grade Tian-ranked martial spirit, a skeleton that seemed to have been taken out from the body of a deity, etc. There were too many of them to count. It was impossible to count them all. A mere ant dares to intrude. Haha, they've let a kid in the martial ancestor realm in here. This is such a great opportunity, I'm going to eat him! Eat him! Eat him! At that instant, a series of hoarse, sharp, frenzied voices echoed in the hall. The voices were all from the weapon spirits. Following this, the broken ancient sword, the terrifying halberd, the ancient bell, the mysterious chain, the ancient fan, and the rest of the artifacts unleashed a terrifying force. It was obvious that they were preparing their attacks to kill Qin Nan. These artifacts were all brought here by the magical hair sword god, the other two sword gods, and a few martial monarchs from some ancient forbidden grounds. Their will had not been erased, and they had been sealed here. Now that Qin Nan, who was only at the martial ancestor realm, had barged in, these ferocious weapon spirits, who were unwilling to accept the result, would naturally attack directly. In an instant, a strong sense of crisis rose in Qin Nan's heart, causing Qin Nan to quickly wake up. Ordinary martial ancestor-level powerhouses would not have been able to stop them. However, these weapon spirits were facing Qin Nan. "You want to kill me? Let me see." A strong battle intent burst out from Qin Nan's body as his right arm exploded into the heaven-shattering saber. "Who dares to move?" Following his words, a magnificent saber intent burst out from the tip of the heaven-shattering saber. What a terrifying blade! What kind of saber is this? It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over the heads of the several hundred artifacts that were preparing powerful killing moves. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cave, and they let out terrified cries. The reason being that the aura and suppression from the saber were too terrifying. Even the weapon spirits that had existed for thousands of years had never seen or heard of anything like it. Clank! Qin Nan flipped his left hand and inserted the heaven-shattering saber into the ground. The spacious hall fell silent. Not a single weapon spirit dared to speak. In addition to that, the artifacts began to tremble slightly. It was as if an ancient emperor had descended upon the place, causing his subjects to bow before him without daring to disobey. Qin Nan was not surprised seeing this. After all, it was the heaven-shattering saber, the left arm of the divine god of battle, and the heaven-breaking emperor had used all his effort to forge it. It was not difficult for it to intimidate the weapon spirits. Qin Nan withdrew his battle intent and began to search around with his left eye. A while later, his eyes were fixed on a corner. He saw a black piece of wood the size of a palm lying on top of an ancient box. It did not emit any aura. The black piece of wood was none other than the piece of the Kanglan tree. Besides, it was 5 times bigger than the piece of the Kanglan tree that Zhang Shaoxian had found on her dagger. If I were to refine this piece of wood, how strong would my 9 martial trees be? Qin Nan's eyes burned passionately as his heart began to race. A moment later, Qin Nan took a deep breath and calmed his thoughts. Since he had already found the piece of the Kanglan tree, there was no reason for him to stay any longer. After all, the artifacts here were sealed by the terrifying sword intent, thus he could not take them away. Besides, he would not do something like robbing the Anti-Heaven Alliance. "I'll go find Wei Ming." Qin Nan pulled out the heaven-shattering saber and left the palace on the 5th floor. However, little did Qin Nan know, as soon as he left, the heaven-shattering saber began to tremble. The thousands of trembling magical treasures finally calmed down. The artifact spirits all breathed a sigh of relief, feeling lucky to have survived a calamity. What was that saber? That was too terrifying. Could it be a god weapon? No, even a god weapon isn't that terrifying. While the weapon spirits were discussing among themselves, a blue glow flickered on the piece of the Kanglan tree that had remained calm all this time. A few breaths later, outside the 5th floor of the Mystic Treasure Palace, Wei Ming raised his eyebrows as he sensed something. This Qin Nan has indeed surpassed the rules of cultivation, to be able to survive the attacks of the artifacts. However, he must be half crippled by now. Having this thought, Wei Ming raised his head and froze with a glimpse. His eyes were filled with astonishment. What was going on? Why was Qin Nan perfectly fine? Not a single drop of blood could be seen, not even his clothes were torn? Hall Leader Wei Ming, how many contribution points would it cost to buy this piece of the Kanglin tree? Qin Nan asked. I remember, 2 million? No, that's not right, it's 3 million contribution points in total. Wei Ming blurted out in a panic. 3 million contribution points? Qin Nan immediately frowned as he felt a headache coming on. He only had 475,000 contribution points on him. He was still 2,525,000 contribution points away from 3 million. According to the Anti-Heaven Alliance's calculation, he would need to kill at least 2 martial monarchs of the South Heaven Sacred Ground, 52 important people of the South Heaven Sacred Ground, and 5 ordinary disciples and elders of the South Heaven Sacred Ground to earn so many contribution points. No way, I must get this piece of the Kanglin tree. I should go to the Star Aligning Palace and see if there are any quests. I'll think of a way to earn the contribution points. Qin Nan immediately made up his mind and left the place. He even forgot about the fact that Wei Ming was trying to set him up. This kid is too terrifying. I can't afford to offend him no matter what. Wei Ming stared at Qin Nan's back and collected his thoughts. He was soaked in cold sweat as he stood still and mumbled to himself. P.S. Stuck in the article, currently organizing the outline. In order to avoid repeating the same pattern and making mistakes in the logic of the article, I'm still designing the plot. End of chapter. Chapter 1201. Among the Anti-Heaven Alliance, the Star Aligning Palace was the most unique compared to the other 3 palaces. From afar, it was possible to see cultivators turning into rays of light entering the palace. At the same time, cultivators were flying out from the palace in an endless stream. These cultivators were all here to accept or submit their quests. After all, contribution points were extremely useful in the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Even martial monarchs had to accept quests to earn contribution points. Upon seeing this, Qin Nan immediately withdrew his aura and sneaked into the hall, before choosing a corner to hide in. 3 new quests have appeared. TSK, these quests aren't simple. Even though there's something wrong with this Duwenza's head, he's ranked 9,500th on the God ranking. It's going to be tricky. Several voices echoed in the palace. Qin Nan raised his head too. A huge crystal floated in front of the hall, and missions of various sizes were recorded on it. The most eye-catching ones were the 3 red-worded quests on the crystal. Martial Monarch Ziwu, Martial Monarch Qinghe, and Martial Monarch of the South Heaven Sacred Ground are suspected to have discovered the secrets of the wretched Disaster Forest, one of the 6 great forbidden grounds. Those who discover the conspiracy of the 3 martial monarchs will be rewarded with 500,000 contribution points. Those who kill the 3 martial monarchs will be rewarded with 5 million contribution points. Search for the missing 7th forbidden ground. Those who discover any clues related to it will be rewarded with 200,000 contribution points. Those who find the 7th forbidden ground will be rewarded with 3 million contribution points. Infiltrate the South Heaven Sacred Ground and steal the secrets of the South Heaven Sacred Ground. Depending on the value of the secrets, the reward will be equivalent to 3 million contribution points. Even Qin Nan could not help but smack his lip. He did not expect the red-worded quests of the Anti-Heaven Alliance to be so difficult. With his current cultivation, if he were to accept the quests, he would be lucky if he could even keep his life, let alone complete the quest. Let's take a look at the rest. Qin Nan glanced downward. During this period, many cultivators discovered his presence and greeted him, to which Qin Nan responded to each of them. 2 hours later, Qin Nan withdrew his gaze and frowned. If the first 3 quests were too difficult, then the rest of the quests were too simple. They only required him to visit some ancient ruins and kill some people of the South Heaven sacred ground, or investigate the whereabouts of some martial monarch. The rewards were not high either. The highest mission was only 100,000 contribution points. The only thing that attracted Qin Nan's attention was the assassination quests. The assassination quests referred to killing 8 ordinary disciples of the South Heaven sacred ground, which would reward them with 10,000 contribution points. Killing 8 important people would reward them with 100,000 contribution points. If he wanted to accumulate 1 million contribution points, he would only need to kill 80 of them, which was 20 less than usual. But where do I get so many important people to kill? If I were to use myself as the bait to lure the experts of the South Heaven sacred ground, it would be fine if I only managed to kill 10 or 20 of them, but I'm afraid I would attract the attention of the martial monarchs. No, I must ask the Stargaze Palace Master. Qin Nan made up his mind. Suddenly, a red light shone from the huge crystal. It was obvious that it was the 4th red-worded quest. Qin Nan and the cultivators were startled, who immediately raised their heads and glanced at it. The ancient battleground is located in the Heavenly Fortune mountain range, one of the 100 mountains. It's only accessible once every 50 years. According to the rumors, the mountain range is closely related to the disappearance of the Heavenly Fortune tribe, the leader of the 8 ancient tribes. The battleground is split into the Heavenly Arcana, Upper Arcana, and Lower Arcana. For thousands of years, no one has entered the Heavenly Arcana. Occasionally, someone would enter it by accident, but they all disappeared. To enter the Upper Arcana, you will need the 7 Slaughter Talisman. To enter the Lower Arcana, you will need to have a cultivation of the 5th layer Martial Ancestor. For the first quest, the Anti-Heaven Alliance has 5 7 Slaughter Talismans, thus it's limited to 5 people. With the talismans, once you enter the Upper Arcana, you will need to kill 3 important people of the South Heaven sacred ground and pluck at least 3 Heavenly Arcana sacred fruit. Each fruit will grant you 150,000 contribution points. If you fail to complete the quest, you will be severely punished. For the second quest, the limit is 20 people entering the Lower Arcana. You will need to kill an important person of the South Heaven sacred ground and pluck at least 10 Heavenly Arcana sacred fruit. Each fruit will grant you 5,000 contribution points. If you fail to complete the quest, you will be severely punished. This red-worded quest was different than the other 3. It explained the situation of the ancient battleground in detail, allowing the cultivators to understand the situation at a glance. After all, the Anti-Heaven Alliance had only been established for 5 years. Most of the cultivators were from the Middle Continent, thus they were not familiar with the Half-God region. The ancient battleground is accessible. You might not know this, but the Heavenly Arcana sacred fruits are extremely useful for 1st layer to 3rd layer martial monarch. When the time comes, the 8 ancient tribes, the God-Beast Forbidden Ground, the Lost Herb Garden, and the 3 great factions will send martial monarchs there. Here. That's not all. The Heavenly Arcana sacred fruits are extremely useful for martial ancestor realm cultivators too. It will attract many martial ancestor realm cultivators. I remember there were at least a few thousand martial ancestor realm cultivators last time. That many people? A few experienced cultivators spoke, which immediately calmed the excited cultivators as if they had just been splashed with a bucket of cold water. Although it seemed like the quest would earn them a huge amount of contribution points, on second thought, it was extremely dangerous. The ancient battleground? Qin Nan's eyes flickered. He now understood that the Heavenly Arcana sacred fruits that were worth 150,000 contribution points could only be found in the Upper Arcana of the ancient battleground. Otherwise, they would not need the 7 Slaughter Talisman to enter the place. That being said, I'm not sure if the Heavenly Arcana tribe is related to the Heavenly Fortune Path and Madame Heavenly Fortune. Qin Nan suddenly recalled something, but he soon shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He began to think carefully. If I were to accept this mission and then accept the assassination mission, it is very possible for me to earn a large amount of contribution points on this trip. Not long after, Qin Nan made up his mind. Even though many martial monarchs would be participating in the upper arcana, did it matter? In this world, there was no easy quest that could earn him a huge amount of contribution points. The only way to earn a huge amount of contribution points was to take the risk. Buzz. Suddenly, 2 lines of golden words appeared behind the red-worded quest. Martial Monarch Rongtian has accepted the first quest, 1-7 Slaughter Talisman. Martial Monarch Minkong has accepted the first quest, 1-7 Slaughter Talisman. The 2 martial monarchs have accepted the quest? Qin Nan was startled. However, on second thought, it did make sense. After all, Martial Monarch Rongtian and Martial Monarch Minkong had only achieved the Martial Monarch realm this year. Thus they were in need of the Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits. Senior, I'd like to accept the first quest. Qin Nan went to the front of the hall and brought his fists together toward an old man. The surrounding cultivators were astounded. The old man nodded and said, Elder Qin Nan has surpassed the rules of cultivation. I'm afraid no one below the Martial Monarch realm can match your strength. I'm sure you've accepted the quest without asking. Before the old man could finish, a tremendous monarch aura swept toward them from outside the hall. End of the chapter. Chapter 1202. Following this, 3 figures appeared in the hall. They were none other than the illusionist Martial Monarch's clone, Elder Tsun Wu, and Elder Lu Shui. Greetings, Hall Leader Illusionist. Greetings, Hall Leader Illusionist. Greetings. The surrounding cultivators were startled, who immediately bowed and greeted. Qin Nan raised his eyebrows too. No one, including him, had expected the illusionist Martial Monarch to come to the Stargaze Palace in person. There's no need to be so courteous. Hall Leader Illusionist nodded slightly. However, his expression sank when he saw Qin Nan. Why was this goddamned guy here too? Despite the doubt in his mind, Hall Leader Illusionist did not overthink it. He glanced at the Vice Hall Leader of the Stargaze Palace and said calmly, I've just received the news about the ancient battleground. Elder Tsun Wu, Elder Lu Shui, and I are here to accept the first quest. Qin Nan was startled hearing this. The old man was startled too, before he let out a wry smile as he collected his thoughts. Hall Leader Illusionist, I'm sorry. Elder Qin Nan was in the middle of accepting the first quest. There are only 2 spots left, oh? Hall Leader Illusionist, Tsun Wu, and Lu Shui were astounded. Qin Nan was here to accept the first quest? Hall Leader Illusionist soon collected his thought. A series of cold grins surfaced in his heart. Previously at the Anti-Heaven Palace, he had spent so much of the Jade Top Elysian, yet he was still tricked by Qin Nan in the end. He was feeling extremely unpleasant, thus he had been thinking of ways to teach Qin Nan a lesson. To his surprise, the chance had come so soon. If that's the case, I shall show you what a Martial Monarch realm cultivator is like. Do I have to repeat what I just said? The 3 of us will take 3 spots. Hall Leader Illusionist said coldly. Streams of Monarch aura were unleashed from his body, causing the entire Stargaze Palace to tremble slightly. Tsun Wu and Lu Shui instantly understood Hall Master Illusionist's intentions. Their gazes towards Qin Nan turned playful. The cultivators immediately realized that Hall Leader Illusionist was trying to use his identity and authority to rob Elder Qin Nan of his spot. The old man's scalp went numb. No matter what he did, he was bound to offend someone. Hall Master Illusionist, shouldn't it be first come, first served when accepting missions? Moreover, this kind of mission with a limited number of people, if everyone wants to accept it, it will naturally be up to the strong. With all due respect, Elder Lu Shui, and even if Elder Tsun Wu was added together, he would still be inferior to me. Qin Nan's face turned cold, and he spoke without any hesitation. You! Tsun Wu and Lu Shui were slightly infuriated. They were about to explode on the spot, but the martial ancestor forcibly gave up on the thought halfway through. Qin Nan's words were not wrong. Even if the four elders worked together, they would still stand no chance against Qin Nan. What a joke! Tsun Wu and Lu Shui are both experienced, how could they not be suitable? Besides, I'm the vice-leader of the Anti-Heaven Palace, one of the 9 martial monarchs of the Anti-Heaven Alliance. If I say there are 3 spots, then there are 3 spots. If you aren't convinced, why don't you try to achieve the martial monarch realm too? Hall Leader Illusionist placed his hands behind himself and glanced down at Qin Nan with a disdainful look. Not long ago, the ancient lightning martial monarch had left the Anti-Heaven Alliance to carry out a mysterious mission. Since he no longer had the support of the ancient lightning martial monarch, so what if he had surpassed the rules of cultivation and destroyed the Pillar of Courage? As long as Qin Nan was in the martial ancestor realm, and he was a martial monarch, he could do whatever he wanted to Qin Nan. Tsun Wu and Lu Shui wore a disdainful look. So what if they came later than you? When the surrounding cultivators saw this, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. They did acknowledge Qin Nan in their hearts, but that was all they could do. They did not dare to say anything. Qin Nan's eyes instantly flickered with an icy, murderous intent. If Hall Leader Illusionist and the others were the first to take the quest, he would not regret it. However, this Hall Leader Illusionist dared to use his authority to bully him? Hall Leader Illusionist, please calm down, please calm down. The old man's forehead was covered in cold sweat as he spoke. I'll add your names to the list now. 2 months later, when the ancient battleground closes, you will return to the Anti-Heaven Alliance to hand in the quest. As the old man performed a hand seal, 3 golden words appeared on the giant crystal. It turned out that the illusionist martial monarch, Tsun Wu and Lu Shui had accepted the quest. Are you not happy about it? Are you not convinced? Ha ha ha, when you become a martial monarch, you can seek your revenge from me. The illusionist martial monarch let out a disdainful laugh. He waved his hand and took the 3 storage bags from the old man before leaving the star-aligning palace with Tsun Wu and Lu Shui. He had achieved his goal and vented his anger, thus there was no need for him to mock Qin Nan any further. Otherwise, it would not be befitting of his identity as a martial monarch. Qin Nan stood in place and stared at the departing figures of the illusionist martial monarch and the others. A terrifying murderous intent rose in his chest. Elder Qin Nan, I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't have a choice either. Why don't I arrange a mission for you privately? It's very simple. Kill an elder of the South Heaven Sacred Ground, and you'll be rewarded with 200,000 contribution points. The old man wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and blurted out. If possible, he did not want to offend Qin Nan. He had no choice but to give Qin Nan a quest with his contribution point. Elder, that won't be necessary. I'll accept the second quest. Qin Nan shook his head. He could not blame anyone for it. The old man was slightly startled, before he said in a joyful tone, All right, I'll arrange it for you now. Qin Nan took a deep breath. There was no way he could change the outcome at this point. The only way was to head to the lower arcana of the ancient battleground and find a way to get the 7 slaughter talisman to sneak into the upper arcana. After all, the heavenly arcana spiritual fruits in the lower arcana were only worth 5,000 contribution points. Only the heavenly arcana sacred fruits in the upper arcana would be able to provide him with a huge amount of contribution points. Elder Qin Nan, it's done. The old man probed. All right, thanks. Qin Nan turned around and headed to the entrance. If I were to kill your clone, I would be expelled from the Anti-Heaven Alliance and lose the peace of the Kanglan Tree. That would be meaningless. However, once we reach the upper arcana. Qin Nan came to a stop and raised his head to look into the distance, before exhaling deeply. His gaze instantly became sharp like the edge of a saber. Once he reached the upper arcana, he would teach the illusionist martial monarch a lesson. Even though he had yet to achieve the martial monarch realm, he was not a soft persimmon that the illusionist martial monarch could easily bully. Meanwhile, in the Dragon Emperor court of the Middle Continent. Stop looking around, there's nothing to see. Let's go. A cold voice could be heard. The two hounds stood at the foot of the human peak. Their eyes were filled with reluctance as they withdrew their gazes after a while. Big sis, where are we going? Skeleton Xiao Hong held her chin and said, the Heavenly Fortune Mountain Range, the Wretched Disaster Forest, or the Land of the Fire Tribe. Which one do you want? Squeak squeak. The Heavenly Fortune Mouse said. The Heavenly Fortune Mountain Range. The two hounds wore gloomy expressions. The Wretched Disaster Forest, the Land of the Fire Tribe, were places that scum like them could go to? The Heavenly Fortune Mountain Range it is. A skeleton, a mouse, and two hounds left the human peak. At this moment, apart from the towering statue of the young man, the human peak, which was brimming with spiritual chi, was completely empty. The entire place was completely silent. End of chapter. Chapter 1203. After leaving the star-aligning palace, Qin Nan calmed his thoughts and activated the Seven Luminaries Sword Talisman. He had to use the talisman to leave the Anti-Heaven Alliance. Following this, Qin Nan vanished into thin air as a formidable sword intent encapsulated his figure. A few breaths later, on the street of a nameless city, under the astounded gazes of many cultivators, Qin Nan's figure appeared out of nowhere. This Seven Luminaries flying sword is fascinating indeed, it even erased my South Heaven seal. Qin Nan glanced at his chest and asked the other cultivators about his current location. He then took out the scroll that Gong Yang had given him. After confirming his destination, Qin Nan's figure turned into a ray of light with a kick and disappeared into the rift. The half-god region was different than the Middle Continent. It did not have a hub like the Middle Sector city, thus he could only travel on his own. Time gradually passed. 2 days were gone in the blink of an eye. So this is the Heavenly Fortune Mountain Range? Qin Nan halted in the air and glanced into the distance. Below him was a vast desert with countless gusts of wind. However, in the distance, a few mountains suddenly appeared and clustered together, forming a continuous mountain range. It was like a curtain rising from the ground, blocking the view of the desert. In addition to that, in the sky far away in the desert, there were several powerful auras, or strange-looking ships, giant swords, etc. flying toward the center of the mountain range at a rapid pace. Despite the great distance, Qin Nan could faintly see an ancient glow flickering in the middle of the mountain range. That place was most likely the entrance to the ancient battleground. Let's head there first. Qin Nan immediately executed the immortal appearance-changing art and transformed into Duan Qing, before flying into the mountain range. The reason for his decision was that the entrance to the ancient battleground would attract quite a number of people from the 8 ancient tribes and the 3 great factions. If someone were to discover his identity, the martial monarchs of the South Heaven Sacred Ground would most likely hunt him down. According to Qin Nan's plan, once he entered the ancient battleground, he would transform into his true self and use himself as bait to lure the people of the South Heaven Sacred Ground to hunt him down. After flying for half an hour in the mountain range, Qin Nan finally came to a stop. 50 li in front of him, a magnificent, godly ray of light shrouded the entire mountain that was more than 10,000 zhang tall. Within it, a formless pressure was emitted, causing others to feel restraining fear, not daring to approach at all. On the peak of the mountain stood a mysterious white door of light that was 500 feet tall and 300 feet wide. It contained countless auras. Qin Nan's eyes flickered with astonishment. If he was not mistaken, the white door had also appeared at the heavenly fortune path of the eastern continent. Judging from the current situation, it seems like this white light door is somehow related to the mysterious Madame Heavenly Fortune. Qin Nan murmured. He then activated his left eye and scanned the area ahead. With a rough glance, he could sense at least a few thousand auras of the martial ancestor realm around the mountain. Most of the auras belonged to rogue cultivators, while the people of the 8 ancient tribes, the 6 great forbidden grounds, and the 3 great factions were extremely rare. Only a few of them had relatively weak cultivations. On top of that, at the bottom of the mountain were 25 palaces covered in forbidding auras. Each palace was occupied by quite a number of cultivators. It was obvious that these palaces were temporary inns and hotels built by the cultivators. That's strange. Why aren't the people of the factions here yet? Qin Nan frowned. He pondered for a moment before heading toward one of the palaces. He did not know much about the current situation, thus he would be able to gather a lot of information in an inn like this. The inn that Qin Nan entered had 4 floors. The number of cultivators drinking in it was the highest among the other inns. There were around 100 of them, and most of them had powerful auras with concealed murderous intents, thus they were not to be underestimated. Qin Nan casually ordered a jar of magical wine and found a corner to sit down and listen in silence. After half the period it took an incense to burn, Qin Nan's eyes flickered with excitement. Just a moment ago, he had learned a few important pieces of information. The ancient battleground would be accessible tomorrow. In addition to that, only the lower arcana would be accessible at the beginning. The upper arcana would only be accessible after 3 days. Normally, the disciples and authorities of the factions would enter the place at this time, as it was a waste of time for them to enter the lower arcana. As for now, the disciples of the factions that had arrived were mostly those with weaker cultivations who had yet to acquire a 7 slaughter talisman. If that's the case, I'll find some heavenly arcana spiritual fruits in the lower arcana and try to get a 7 slaughter talisman before the factions enter the place. Qin Nan made up his mind. At that instant, a few voices suddenly caught Qin Nan's attention. Sigh, I wonder if I'll have a chance to get a 7 slaughter talisman this year. Otherwise, I'll have to find more heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. Let's work together then. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Are you going to take part in the battle for the map tomorrow? Battle for the map? Cultivator, it's my first time here at the ancient battleground. Can you tell me what the battle for the map is? The middle-aged man said in a serious tone when he heard the question, the battle for the map is just a name. In the past, every time the ancient battleground was opened, a person called the Ugly Crow Daoist would come here to sell the maps of the heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. Haha, that's right, this Ugly Crow Daoist is extremely mysterious. Even though his cultivation is not as strong as the martial monarch realm, he's quite remarkable. Besides, he has a rule that he only sells 100 maps each time. Among the 100 maps, 5 of them are golden maps, while the other 95 are ordinary maps. In the past, many cultivators managed to find a huge amount of heavenly arcana spiritual fruits with the help of the golden map. Cultivator, I don't think that's the right thing to say. It's not like you can find a huge amount of heavenly arcana spiritual fruits in the golden maps every time. Some people have failed a few times, but those from the ordinary maps still manage to find a huge amount of heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. That's only the minority. By the way, I almost forgot to mention, if you want to take part in the battle for the map, you'll have to pay the Ugly Crow Daoist 2000 G. D stones. As the middle-aged man and the other cultivators discussed, the details of the battle for the map became clearer. Humph, God stones? I won't pay the God stones. As long as the ugly crow Taoist shows me the map, I'll rob it right away. A young man sitting on the third floor of the inn with a prideful look said all of a sudden, "Kid, don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything. In the past, every time the ancient war took place, there would always be cultivators trying to rob the map. Guess what happened next?" A blue-haired old man said calmly. "What happened? They all died?" The proud young man frowned. Wrong. After the ancient battleground ended, all of these cultivators disappeared mysteriously. Later on, someone discovered that they were all transformed into human-shaped ancient trees by some terrifying secret technique and planted on this mountain. Now, there are at least 70 to 80 of them. The blue-haired old man laughed coldly. This. In addition to the proud young man, many cultivators were startled too. The ugly crow Taoist? Qin Nan's lips curled upward. This was getting interesting. End of chapter. Chapter 1204. Following this, the cultivators began to discuss some of the rumors and secret. Qin Nan listened with great interest. In the half-god region, apart from the inconvenience of traveling, there was no faction that specialized in collecting information like the Shadow Pagoda. As such, only a small number of people knew about the battles between martial monarchs, the deaths of martial monarchs, etc. Only shocking events such as achieving the martial monarch realm and achieving the martial god realm, or surpassing the rules of cultivation, or the battles between martial gods would be able to shake the entire half-god region. All of a sudden, a powerful aura surged at the entrance of the inn. Many cultivators, including Qin Nan, raised their heads and glanced toward it. After all, there were many experts in the inn, thus ordinary people would not dare to be so high-profile. The person who emitted the aura was a young man wearing a golden-threaded robe with a wooden badge on his waist. The young man's eyes were filled with undisguised arrogance. Behind the young man, there were 5 other people. The auras emitted from each of them were extremely distinct. Apart from the young man, the other 5 were all disciples of the 8 ancient tribes. Who's that young man? I've never heard of him before, but the people behind him are all inner disciples of the 8 ancient tribes. The young man is leading the way. It seems like his identity is even nobler. No wonder he's so high-profile. The cultivators in the inn whispered among themselves. Although some of them were displeased, they did not say anything. Xiaoxian? Qin Nan's eyes flickered with astonishment. Among the 5 people behind the young man, one of them was none other than Zhan Xiaoxian. Brother Duan Qing? You're here too? Zhan Xiaoxian turned her head around and her face was filled with joy. Why are you here now? Qin Nan asked. Zhan Xiaoxian's status in the battle tribe was considered average. Normally, she would be allowed to enter the upper arcana. My father didn't allow me to participate and asked me to go into seclusion. I wasn't willing to, so I snuck out. The smile on Zhan Xiaoxian's face grew brighter. Xiaoxian, who's this? The young man who had released his aura earlier asked with a frown. His gaze towards Qin Nan contained a trace of hostility. Initially, with his identity, he was allowed to follow his tribe to the upper arcana, but he had purposely decided to come earlier so that he could be with Zhan Xiaoxian. Only not enough. What caused the young man to feel unpleasant was that he had paid such a huge price for Zhan Xiaoxian, yet she was still treating him coldly. However, Zhan Xiaoxian was acting so friendly toward this strange young man before him. Everyone, this is Big Brother Duan Qing, an extremely powerful eye sorcerer. Brother Duan Qing, this is Hua Dun, the son of an elder in the Lost Herb Garden. This is Ao Sha from the Blood Race and the Dead Spirit races. Zhan Xiaoxian introduced them one by one. People from the Lost Herb Garden? I am Duan Qing. Qin Nan's eyes lit up upon hearing this, and he cupped his fists toward Huadun. It was his first time meeting a disciple of the Lost Herb Garden in the half-god region. He didn't know why, but after finding out that Huadun was a disciple of the Lost Herb Garden, he didn't feel any ill will towards Huadun. A powerful eye sorcerer? Who's your master, Master Duan Qing? Which faction is your master from? Huadun brought his fists together toward Qin Nan and asked in a mocking tone. I don't belong to any faction, my master is the sacred Lord Blue Dragon. Qin Nan said with a calm smile. Don't belong to any faction? Not even the three great factions? Xiao Xian, I'm not trying to nag you, but you should be careful when you're making friends. Otherwise, you'll suffer great losses. Huadun's gaze toward Qin Nan was filled with disdain. Not only did he not belong to any faction, he had never even heard of this so-called Sacred Lord Blue Dragon. Besides, his name did not contain the word martial monarch, thus it was obvious that this Sacred Lord Blue Dragon was not a martial monarch. As such, it went without saying that Huadun would not be interested in Qin Nan. The 5 disciples of the ancient tribes wore cold expressions after hearing the words. They did not even greet Qin Nan. Qin Nan's expression remained the same, but the good impression he had toward Huadun had completely vanished. Huadun, stop talking nonsense. Otherwise, don't blame me for showing no mercy. Zhang Xiaoxian's expression turned cold. You! Huadun was infuriated. He did not expect Zhang Xiaoxian to treat him with such an attitude just because of a mere Duan Qing. Forget it, it's fine if you don't want to talk about it. Let's go to the room on the 4th floor, it's my treat today. Huadun withheld his anger and glanced coldly at Qin Nan before saying smilingly, Brother Duan Qing, shall we go together? Zhang Xiaoxian asked. Huadun felt a great pressure on his chest hearing this. I won't be going, you guys have fun. Qin Nan waved his hand. This. Zhang Xiaoxian was about to say something, but she had no choice but to nod her head after seeing Qin Nan's gaze. After all, there was still some time before they entered the ancient battleground. She still had time to look for Brother Duan Qing. At least you know what's good for you. Huadun let out a relieved sigh and glared at Qin Nan before transmitting his voice. Following this, he proceeded to the 4th floor with Zhang Xiaoxian and the others. Qin Nan was left speechless. He did not expect this Huadun to be so scornful, treating him like this just because of such a trivial matter. That being said, I wonder if the princess will be here this time? Qin Nan's mood instantly improved as a thought crossed his mind. He even had a hint of anticipation. What had the princess turned into now? Following this, Qin Nan left the inn and found an ancient tree. He sat down with his legs crossed and began to cultivate. Time gradually passed. As the opening of the ancient battleground approached, more cultivators arrived from all directions. During this period, some of the cultivators even fought one another because they were not on good terms with one another. Finally, on the 2nd day, the mysterious white door at the top of the mountain began to vibrate softly all of a sudden. This caused the cultivators around the mountain to be aware of something, who immediately piqued with their divine sense. The ancient battleground is about to open. TSK, there's still some time before it actually opens. The battle for the map should start now, right? A few voices could be heard. Qin Nan, who was cultivating in seclusion, opened his eyes and glanced at the giant door at the top of the mountain. At that instant, a rare occurrence took place. From the forest in the distance, a huge cloud of white fog blew out. Numerous pitch-black birds let out strange cries as they flew into the sky. A glamorous figure slowly walked out from the white mist. For some unknown reason, even though the footsteps of this figure were extremely light, they were clearly heard by everyone present. Time is running out, 50 years have passed. Fellow cultivators, I'm the ugly crow Taoist. I've prepared 100 maps here. Are you interested in competing for them? If so, please pay 2,000 GOD stones, 2,000 GOD stones. Qin Nan was quite interested in the ugly crow Taoist. He immediately activated his left eye and prepared to take a look. However, Qin Nan's expression froze in the next moment. Just a moment ago, the 9 martial trees in his body shuddered as if they were aware of something. End of chapter. Chapter 1205. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second? Chapter 1213. The Kanglan Tree Pattern. What's going on here? Qin Nan frowned. The 9 martial trees had once merged with the piece of the Kanglan tree. If the ugly crow Taoist had the piece of the Kanglan tree, it was reasonable for the 9 martial trees to react strangely. Most importantly, the ring on Qin Nan's finger did not show any reaction, implying that the woman did not have the piece of the Kanglan tree. There must be a reason for everything. Let's observe this ugly crow Taoist and see if I can find anything. Qin Nan mumbled as he raised his head. A glamorous figure walked out from the mist. Even though she was wearing an oversized black robe, it was unable to conceal her attractive figure. Even though the ugly crow Taoist was wearing a veil, her attractive figure was still eye-catching. Why is the ugly crow Taoist a woman? That's strange, wasn't she a man before? Could it be that she's been in disguise all along? Many of the rogue cultivators in the surroundings were confused. Let's begin. The ugly crow Taoist spoke as if she did not see anything. Following her words, following a few whooshes, the cultivators flew forward and handed over 2,000 GOD stones. Following this, a strange golden rune would appear on their chest. That being said, most of the cultivators stood aside with cold grins on their faces. Even though they were not going to compete for the maps, they could still rob the maps from the cultivators after entering the lower arcana. It would save them a lot of trouble. Strange, even though her cultivation is outstanding, it's only outstanding. There's nothing special about it. Screw it, let's take part in the battle for the maps. Qin Nan pondered for a moment before shaking his head. He flew forward and handed over the remaining GOD stones before retreating. However, little did Qin Nan know as he was leaving, the ugly crow Taoist shuddered slightly, as if she was raising her head to look at him. A while later, 100 cultivators had joined the battle. Huadun, Zhan Shaoxian, Aosha, and the others were involved too. Let's talk about the rules. If you fight within the circle, you will be disqualified if you leave the circle. Furthermore, they were not allowed to use their martial spirits or martial trees, nor were they allowed to kill anyone. The time limit is 50 breaths of time. After 50 breaths of time, the map will belong to whoever has it. The ugly crow Taoist flicked her sleeve and shot out a beam of green light. He then drew a circle with a radius of 3 miles on the ground. Qin Nan and the other cultivators immediately stepped into the circle. Big Brother Duan Qing, go for it! Zhan Shaoxian yelled with a look of anticipation. Ever since the last time, she wanted to see Qin Nan fight again. Huadun's expression turned ugly when he heard this. He let out a cold snort as he made a mental note to get the golden map and make a name for himself. Begin now. The ugly crow Taoist raised her voice as she swung her sleeves once again, causing a green glow to appear at the center of the circle. After 3 breaths' time, the green glow shattered into pieces and spat out a total of 100 ancient maps into the circle. However, at that instant, including Qin Nan, the 99 cultivators participating in the battle, and the surrounding cultivators were stunned seeing this. They could only see the 100 ancient maps descending rapidly. However, 5 of the golden maps gathered above Qin Nan's head and descended toward Qin Nan. F***K me. Most of the cultivators could not help but curse. Isn't this fellow's luck a little too good? So long as he waved his hand lightly, he would absolutely be able to obtain all 5 golden maps. Obtaining 5 golden maps at the same time, this was simply unheard of in the previous map-seizing battles, never seen before. Qin Nan swiftly collected his thoughts. Although he had no idea why the ugly crow Taoist was doing this, since the 5 golden maps were presented to him, he would not hesitate to claim them all. However, in the nick of time, Qin Nan's 9 martial trees suddenly shuddered as the ring on his finger emitted a faint glow. Even though it was extremely faint, it served as a great explosion in Qin Nan's eyes. If the ring was reacting, it meant that there was a piece of the Kanglan tree. That's it. Qin Nan scanned the crowd and instantly locked his gaze onto an ordinary-looking ancient map. Without hesitation, his figure turned into a blurry figure as he grabbed at the ancient map. However, in the eyes of the crowd, this action of his was no less shocking than a thunderclap. This. Why wasn't he grabbing the golden maps? Why was he grabbing an ordinary map instead? The golden maps are mine. Among the 100 cultivators, a burly man reacted quickly. His face was flushed with excitement, and he summoned a giant hand to grab the 5 golden maps. Don't even think about it. The rest of the cultivators reacted and made their moves too. At that instant, countless glows flickered within the circle. Even though it was only 50 breaths time, it was enough to trigger a huge battle. Qin Nan's figure moved rapidly as he waved his hand and retrieved the ancient map with ease. After all, it was only an ordinary map, thus no one dared to compete with him for it. Stop! 50 breaths later, the ugly crow Taoist suddenly uttered a roar, which exploded above them like a thunderclap. The cultivators who were in the midst of the battle were startled. They clenched their teeth and stopped in their tracks, grabbing an ordinary map nearby. Everyone had an ancient map. However, they were all after the golden maps, thus they were not willing to give up as they had yet to get their hands on one. As for the 5 golden maps, Huadun grabbed 2 of them, Ao Sha grabbed 1, and 2 stronger rogue cultivators grabbed the remaining 2. Brother Duan Qin Yu. Zhang Shaoxian did not even glance at Huadun. She stared at Qin Nan with a blank face. The crowd collected their thoughts and glanced at Qin Nan. Ha! Master Duan Qing, thank you so much. If it weren't for you, how could I have gotten 2 of the golden maps? But to be honest, what you've done today has really widened my horizons. The excited Huadun glanced at Qin Nan and burst out laughing. His eyes were filled with a hint of disdain. In his eyes, Qin Nan was a complete idiot. Even though Qin Nan might think that the ordinary map had some secrets, or that it was extremely important, it was still incomparable to the 5 golden map. As expected of a master, I'm impressed. Ao Sha's eyes were filled with disdain as he spoke with a hint of sarcasm. Is there something wrong with his head? Duan Qing, right? What AF *** king idiot. Shu, lower your voice. Is there something wrong with his head? If you scold him, he'll fight you with his life. I'm speechless too, not even competing for the 5 golden maps? Sigh, if only I had the chance, the 5 golden maps would definitely be mine. At that instant, in addition to them, the cultivators who did not manage to acquire the golden map and those who were enraged because they did not manage to acquire the golden map immediately burst out cursing. Their gazes toward Qin Nan were filled with disdain and disdain. End of chapter. Chapter 1206. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second? Providing you with interesting novels to read. Chapter 1214. The lower arcana. Qin Nan remained calm as he listened to the discussions and glanced at the expressions of the crowd. In his eyes, these people were utterly hilarious. So what if they had 5 golden maps? Even 10 or 100 golden maps were not as important as this ordinary ancient map. Besides, he could choose whichever map he wanted. What did it have to do with them? The battle has come to an end. Congratulations on finding the Heavenly Arcana spiritual fruit. By the way, those who took part in the battle, if you manage to find me in the lower arcana, you can spend the night with me. The ugly crow Taoist suddenly opened her mouth. Her voice was full of charm. Spend the night with me? Is that even possible? The crowd was attracted by the words. Many among the cultivators who did not take part in the battle wore unpleasant looks. As for the cultivators who had taken part in the battle, their eyes burned passionately. This ugly crow Taoist had such an alluring figure. She must be a great beauty. Most importantly, if they were able to cultivate with the ugly crow Taoist, they might be able to find more heavenly arcana spiritual fruits in the lower arcana. The ugly crow Taoist chuckled. Then, she turned around and walked towards the dense fog at an extremely fast speed. Cultivator, what's the deal with the map? Qin Nan immediately transmitted his voice, seeing this. Hee, don't worry, I'll find you when we reach the upper arcana. The ugly crow Taoist transmitted her voice to Yi Shiwen. Her tone was full of playfulness. Then, she pointed her toes and disappeared into the thick fog. The upper arcana? Qin Nan was startled. The ugly crow Taoist wasn't going to the lower arcana? Didn't she say that she could find him in the lower arcana and spend the night with him? Was she trying to tease the cultivators? At that instant, a few loud thuds could be heard coming from the sky, as if hundreds of ancient beasts were stomping on the ground, or the sound of a drum being beaten. Qin Nan and the rest of the cultivators were startled, causing them to raise their heads. The primordial light looming over the mountain parted to both sides as if it was blown away by a gust of wind, revealing a path that led to the top of the mountain. The mysterious white door that was tightly shut at the top of the mountain slowly opened, revealing streaks of illusory white light. The ancient battleground has opened. Fellow Taoists, let's do as we agreed. Haha, it's finally open. This time, I must get more heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. The cultivators instantly became restless as they executed powerful movement monarch arts and dashed toward the peak of the mountain at a shocking speed. From afar, it looked like a school of carps were fighting to be the first to jump into the Dragon's Gate. It was a spectacular sight. Qin Nan nodded at Zhang Shaoxian without explaining anything. With a kick, he weaved through the crowd and disappeared into the crowd. As soon as he entered the mysterious white door, a mysterious force encapsulated Qin Nan's figure. A few hundred breaths later, Qin Nan felt his figure shudder as he found himself in an unfamiliar place. So this is the lower arcana? Qin Nan scanned his surroundings. The sky was eerily white while the ground was dark red. The surroundings were filled with mountains, woods, lakes, etc. It did not seem too different from the outside world. There are no other cultivators here. It seems like this place is random. Qin Nan mumbled to himself as he withdrew his gaze. With a thought, he took out the map from his summer ring. There were over a few thousand cultivators present when he was trying to acquire the map, thus he was not allowed to peek into its secrets. Qin Nan was astounded as soon as he glanced at the map. The map was made with the hide of some ancient beast, which still had a hint of its aura. The map on it was obviously the map of the lower arcana. There were 3 red dots on the map, with a line of ancient words on them, indicating the places with the heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. Everything seemed normal, except for the fact that Qin Nan did not find any pieces of wood. In other words, there were no pieces of the Kanglan tree. I see, the reason why the ancient map is able to trigger a reaction from the ring is because it contains a hint of the Kanglan tree's aura. Qin Nan soon came to a realization, causing him to fall into deep thought. The aura of the Kanglan tree would not appear on the map on its own, thus it was most likely the doing of the ugly crow Taoist. Why would the ugly crow Taoist do that? Could it be that the ugly crow Taoist was aware of the aura of the Kanglan tree on him, thus she purposely made the map to test him? It's highly possible that the ugly crow Taoist is probing me. Now that I've taken the ancient map, the ugly crow Taoist will assume that I have a piece of the Kanglan tree, and will target me in the upper arcana. Qin Nan squinted. He was not surprised by this scene at all. The Kanglan continent was extremely vast, with countless experts. It went without saying that someone would be interested in the pieces of the Kanglan tree. I'll fight you when I reach the upper arcana. For now, I should focus on finding the heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. Qin Nan shook his head and flew into the distance without hesitation. With his left eye of the divine god of battle, it was easier for him to find the heavenly arcana spiritual fruits. However, half an hour later, Qin Nan came to a stop. He had forgotten that the lower arcana was extremely vast. It would take him a lot of time to travel to every corner of the lower arcana spiritual fruits. If he were to search aimlessly, he would not be able to find many heavenly arcana spiritual fruits if he was unlucky. I almost forgot, aren't there 3 places marked on the map? Should I take a look? A sudden thought crossed Qin Nan's mind. He took out the ancient map and picked a spot among the 3 red dots before flying toward it once again. Although this ordinary ancient map might not be of any use, it was still much better than searching aimlessly by himself. Since he still had plenty of time, it wouldn't hurt to try it out. Time gradually passed. 3 hours later, Qin Nan arrived at a mountain range. During this period, he was quite lucky, as he had found 3 heavenly arcana spiritual fruits in total. This should be it. Qin Nan's figure landed on the ground and scanned the woods in front of him, before he began to search carefully. According to the description on the map, he had to find an ancient tree with red leaves and strike it 3 times. This is it. Qin Nan locked his gaze onto an ancient tree and struck it 3 times. A shocking sight took place. Over 10 li away, a loud explosion could be heard as the ground began to crack open. A formation that had been silent for a long time was awakened, emitting a white glow. Qin Nan did not discover anything with his left eye, as the formation had yet to be activated. However, to activate it, he would need to strike the tree 3 times. It seems like I've come to the right place. There might be a lot of heavenly arcana spiritual fruits here. Qin Nan's eyes flickered as he swiftly entered the formation. However, little did Qin Nan know, as he entered the formation, the ground closed up and the aura returned to normal. In addition to that, Huadun, Ao Sha, the others, the 2 rogue cultivators who had found the golden map, and over 30 other rogue cultivators were flying toward the mountain range at a rapid pace. End of the chapter. Chapter 1207. Genius 1 second. Remember love divided by go divided by little? SageNet, providing you with interesting novels to read. Chapter 1215. All the cultivators are stunned. A few hundred breaths later, a total of 40 cultivators landed on the mountain. Love go little say, W. Chew. It was as if a giant hand was controlling everything. The 40 cultivators were scattered across more than 10 different places. None of them were aware of each other's presence. According to our maps, there must be a lot of heavenly arcana spiritual fruits here. Our job now is to find a blue rock the size of a palm and break it into pieces, Huadun said as he landed on the ground. It seems like someone else has arrived at the mountain too. Ao Sha, who was standing at the back, said with a glint in his eyes. That's not a big deal. I heard from the others that the difference between a normal ancient map and a golden map is that the golden map points to the right place. Even though a normal ancient map can also reach the same place, the annotations on it are wrong. It will only lead them to a trap. Huadun glanced at Zhang Shaoxian and said in a prideful tone, I see, the golden map is the best. Luckily, we've found the golden map. The other disciples of the ancient tribes blurted out and proceeded to search the place. A while later, they found a blue rock the size of a palm among the bushes. After breaking it into pieces, an ancient tree exploded following a loud crash, revealing a passage of a formation. It's here. Huadun was overjoyed as he led the crowd into the passage. Meanwhile, similar scenes were taking place in other places on the mountain too. The rogue cultivators relied on the golden map and the normal ancient map in their hands to find the key points on the maps, allowing them to open up the hidden passages and enter them. That being said, no one managed to find the spot where Qin Nan had been. Time gradually passed. Huadun, Ao Sha, and the rest of the rogue cultivators managed to overcome the dangers and ventured deeper into the mountain. After the period it took an incense to burn, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others finally arrived at the bottom of the passage. Before them was a water curtain that seemed to be formed by countless water droplets. This is, Huadun, Ao Sha, Zhan Shaoxian, and the others were astounded when they saw the situation inside the barrier. Behind the curtain was a giant stone hall. In the middle of the hall were 3 ancient white trees. On the branches of the trees were crystal-clear fruits emitting mystical auras and tremendous qi. There were 80 of them in total. These fruit. It was the heavenly profound spiritual fruit. Even Huadun, Ao Sha, Zhan Shaoxian, and the others were breathing heavily. 80 heavenly profound spiritual fruits was a huge amount of wealth. Quick, quick, turn on the water screen. Huadun yelled excitedly. Once he obtained the 80 heavenly arcana spiritual fruits, he would collect more heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. Not only would he be able to claim the rewards from the Lost Herb Garden, he would also be able to impress Zhan Shaoxian. As for Duan Qing, there was no way to compare with him. Boom! Boom! At that instant, Ao Sha and the others swiftly made their moves, executing powerful monarch arts. However, as they continued to attack, their excited expressions gradually changed, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured onto their heads. The reason being that they realized that no matter how they attacked, including using forbidden arts and monarch talismans, they could not damage the water screen in the slightest. How could this be? No, stop attacking the water screen. Let's dig a hole in the mountain so we can sneak into the hall. Huadun's expression changed rapidly, before he uttered a roar and executed a powerful monarch art, aiming it at the wall beside him. The others swiftly made their moves too. After a series of explosions, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the rest of the disciples were dumbfounded. They realized that the wall was extremely obscure. Apart from leaving some marks on it, they could not damage it at all. What was going on? This wasn't Gene Tuesday. Why would he encounter something like this? Could it be that the fortune was right in front of them, and all they could do was to look at it? At that instant, Huadun and the others raised their heads and glanced forward as they became aware of something. At the same time, 3 water screens appeared on both sides of the stone hall. Behind each of the 3 water screens were several unaffiliated cultivators. The 3 groups of rogue cultivators were startled when they saw Huadun and his crew, before they noticed the 80 heavenly arcana spiritual fruits in the hall. Their breathing intensified as they began to attack wildly just like Huadun and his crew. However, following a series of explosions, the 3 groups of rogue cultivators were dumbfounded too. They realized that no matter what they tried, they could not damage the water screens, nor could they pass through them. In other words, they could either back off or just stand there and watch. Next, another 8 water curtains appeared on both sides of the stone hall. They were the remaining 8 groups of cultivators. These 8 groups of cultivators were the same as the other 3 groups of cultivators that Huadun and his crew had encountered. At first, they were in a daze. Then, their breathing quickened as they attacked crazily. After that, they were all dumbstruck. F***Kme. What's going on? Damn it, are they all traps? This map is too unreliable. It's too deceitful. It's indeed a trap, even Huadun and his crew are trapped there. The crowd of over 40 rogue cultivators wore twisted expressions as they burst out cursing. They finally realized that the instructions on the map were clearly a huge trap. I was wondering why it was wrong, so it turns out that every map is the same. This place is a trap, no one will be able to find it. Huadun let out a relieved sigh as he straightened his back and said, even though he was displeased that he did not manage to find the heavenly arcana spiritual fruits, he felt much better as the others did not manage to find the heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. Zhang Shaoxian would not look down on him either. It seems like we'll have to find another place, Aosha said. Huadun and the others nodded and prepared to leave. The other cultivators behind the water curtain cursed out loud, but there was nothing they could do and they also prepared to leave. However, at that instant, a rumbling sound could be heard coming from above the hall. It was obvious that someone was heading toward the hall. Huadun and his crew, and the rogue cultivators halted in their tracks and subconsciously glanced at the source of the sound. Another water screen appeared, and the person behind it was none other than Qin Nan. After Qin Nan entered the cave, he had encountered many ancient formations. It took him quite some time to crack them open, thus he was late. Brother Duan Qing? Zhang Xiaoxian's eyes flickered. Duan Qing? The other cultivators were startled too. Humph, I was wondering who it was, so it's that idiot. It seems that the ordinary ancient map he obtained isn't anything special. Isn't he still trapped outside the water curtain? Huadun, who was initially displeased, immediately mocked after seeing Zhang Xiaoxian's reaction. Humph, so it's him. He's just an idiot, there's no need to waste your time on him. Let's go. The other rogue cultivators wore disdainful looks too, not willing to stay any longer. However, at that instant a shocking sight took place. As Qin Nan stared at the spectacle in the stone hall with a blank expression, the water curtain in front of him emitted a series of crackling sounds, as it slowly parted on its own. Huadun and the rest of the cultivators felt like they had been struck by lightning. End of the chapter. Chapter 1208. How is this possible? The water curtain opened on its own? Holy crap! What's going on? Huadun and the rest of the cultivators were dumbfounded. They were well aware of how powerful the water curtain was. Only a martial monarch would be able to break through it. However, Qin Nan's water curtain had opened on its own. What was going on? I see. Qin Nan collected his thoughts and wore a grin. He now realized that Huadun and the rest of the cultivators were most likely trapped behind the water curtain. Otherwise, they would have immediately come out and claimed the 80 heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. The fact that it's able to trap so many cultivators indicates that the water curtain is nothing ordinary. It seems like the map that the ugly crow Taoist gave me is no ordinary map. According to her speculation, it's very likely that she wants me to loot the heavenly arcana spiritual fruits, then wait until the upper arcana to attack me and claim the fruits with ease. Qin Nan's eyes flickered. There was always a reason for everything. It was impossible that an ordinary map would be so powerful. After coming to a realization, Qin Nan stepped into the stone hall and headed toward the 3 ancient trees. Seeing this, Huadun and the rest of the cultivators stared with their eyes wide open. That was 80 heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. They could only watch as such a huge fortune was taken away by someone else. It felt like they were being roasted on fire, causing them to feel extremely uncomfortable. Qin Nan came to a stop and flung his sleeves, storing the heavenly arcana spiritual fruits into his summer ring. Qin Nan glanced at Huadun and the others as a sudden thought crossed his mind. He said with a calm smile, I didn't expect to be so lucky today. I managed to find 80 heavenly arcana spiritual fruits with just an ordinary map. While saying this, Qin Nan suddenly raised his eyebrows, as he saw a groove at the bottom of the wall in the middle of the hall. This groove was extremely well hidden, and there was not the slightest trace of spirit qi. If it was not by accident, Qin Nan would not have discovered it. More importantly, the size of the groove was exactly the same as the ancient map in Qin Nan's hand. Furthermore, there were 3 dark red dots in the groove, which were exactly the same as the 3 red dots on his ancient map. This must be a hidden mechanism. Wait a moment. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Try putting the ancient map up there. Qin Nan thought to himself. Of course, the other cultivators were completely unaware of Qin Nan's discovery. On the other hand, when these cultivators heard Qin Nan's words, they felt as if they had been punched in the chest. They felt extremely sullen. This guy was simply too evil. After picking up such a huge bargain, he actually deliberately came to provoke them. Zhang Xiaoxian's eyes flickered with excitement. She glanced at Huadun and the others as a sudden thought crossed her mind. She raised her eyebrows and said, "What did you say during the battle for the map? Big brother Duan Qing is a fool? Very stupid? What about now? So what if you've found the golden map? What's the point of a golden map if you can't find the treasure? You dare to mock brother Duan Qing, how ignorant are you?" Zhang Xiaoxian's mouth was extremely sharp. Each of her words was like a dagger stabbing into the hearts of the cultivators. The expressions of Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others instantly darkened. Suddenly, Huadun's expression cleared up as a thought crossed his mind. A cold grin appeared on his face as he said, "Xiaoxian, you're too naive. Duan Qing must have used some kind of trick to enter the place. If that's the case, why was there a water curtain when Qin Nan first appeared?" Well, Zhang Xiaoxian was startled. She had totally forgotten about it. Humph, an ordinary ancient map is just an ordinary ancient map. We cultivators here have seen so many golden maps and ordinary ancient maps, but none of them lead to the correct path. Only Duan Qing's ordinary ancient map is the correct path? How ridiculous! Huadun chuckled. That's right, Duan Qing must have used some kind of trick. I was wondering why an ordinary ancient map was able to open the water curtain. This Duan Qing is still as stubborn as a duck. In order to prove that he's not an idiot, he even claimed that the ordinary ancient map was the reason why he was able to enter the hall. How cunning, I was almost fooled by him. Ao Sha and the rest of the cultivators collected their thoughts. Their gazes toward Qin Nan were filled with disdain and disdain. So what if he had found the heavenly arcana spiritual fruits with his own trick? It still did not change the fact that he had given up on the 5 golden maps. Besides, good luck did not come often. He would not be able to find anything the next time. You? Zhang Xiaoxian's eyes flickered with anger, but she had no idea how to react at that instant. She refuted. Everyone, are you done yet? If you're done, be quiet. Qin Nan glanced at the crowd after collecting the heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. He then took out the ordinary ancient map and headed toward the center of the hall. Huadun and the rest of the cultivators were startled. What was Qin Nan trying to do by taking out the ancient map all of a sudden? There's a groove there, a groove in the shape of an ancient map. One of the cultivators suddenly blurted out as he discovered something. A groove in the shape of an ancient map? Huadun and the rest of the cultivators shuddered. If that was the case, it meant that there was a hidden mechanism in the hall. There would surely be something valuable inside if they were able to open it. Qin Nan did not bother looking at them. With a flick of his finger, the ancient map in his hand was flicked into the groove. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the blink of an eye, square openings appeared in the stone temple. White arrows shot out from these openings, and the tips of these arrows released a huge amount of poisonous gas. Destruction domain! Qin Nan uttered a groan. A black glow burst out and shattered the poisonous arrows into pieces. However, the poisonous arrows seemed to be endless. Even Hu Dun and the rest of the cultivators felt a great chill running down their spines. If they were in Qin Nan's shoes, it would take them a great effort to resist the poisonous arrows. Ha ha ha, Xiao Xian, did you see that? The groove must be a mechanism to activate the treasure. However, Qin Nan's ordinary ancient map won't work. Otherwise, why would it attract so many attacks? Hu Dun burst out laughing as a thought crossed his mind. He was gloating. It would be best if this Duan Qing died in there. The other cultivators could not help but burst out laughing after hearing the words, their faces filled with joy. They were already displeased that Qin Nan had taken so many heavenly arcana, spiritual fruits, for free. How could they not be happy when they saw Qin Nan suffering? All of a sudden, all of the poison arrows disappeared. A mysterious symbol suddenly appeared on the water screen in front of everyone. A beam of white light shot out from the symbol and shone at the center of the stone hall. Rumble. A series of explosions took place. In an instant, the walls of the stone palace underwent a tremendous change, as they began to move apart from each other. A surge of majestic and boundless spirit chi also surged out. End of the chapter. Chapter 1209. Everyone's gaze shifted toward Qin Nan at the same time. After the wall of the stone hall opened, a secret chamber was revealed. It was filled with many arrays and restrictions. In the middle of the chamber were 2 stone boxes. Inside the boxes, there were 2 fruits that were filled with boundless spiritual energy and had countless purple runes entwined around them. They were quietly lying there. Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits. Damn, 2 Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits? The eyes of all the cultivators were filled with great astonishment. This was the lower arcana, and no one had ever found the Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits here. Besides, the Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits were more precious and valuable than the Heavenly Arcana Spiritual Fruit. Qin Nan could not help but feel joyful. The loot was indeed great. 2 Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits and 80 Heavenly Arcana Spiritual Fruits were equivalent to 700,000 contribution points in total. There are 3 places on the map. There are 2 places left. I should hurry. Qin Nan soon calmed his thoughts and waved his hand to retrieve the 2 Heavenly Arcana Sacred Fruits before retrieving the map. Xiao Xian, we'll meet again. Qin Nan waved his hand at Zhan Xiaoxian and glanced at Hu Dun and the others. He let out a calm smile and disappeared from the hall with a kick. What were you guys talking about? Zhan Xiaoxian collected her thoughts and glanced at Hu Dun and the others with a disdainful look. This. Hu Dun, Ao Sha, and the rest of the cultivators collected their thoughts. Their faces were filled with awkwardness. Was this just an ordinary ancient map? Was it stupid for Duan Qing to give up on the 5 golden maps? They were the stupid ones, all right. If they had known the ancient map was this powerful, they would not have asked for the golden map. You're such a snob. Zhan Xiaoxian let out a hollow laugh at Hu Dun and left the place. Hu Dun's expression changed rapidly. Despite his stupidity, he immediately realized that his image in Zhan Xiaoxian's heart was completely destroyed. It's all because of that goddamn Duan Qing. Hu Dun clenched his fists tightly as his eyes flickered with murderous intent. That being said, he did not dare to chase after Duan Qing recklessly, as it would put Zhan Xiaoxian at risk. However, judging from the fact that he was able to block so many poisonous arrows with ease, this Duan Qing's cultivation must be very strong. I almost forgot. I can inform Lord Father of what happened here, and then ask Lord Father to take action. That way. Hu Dun suddenly thought of something. He quickly took out his badge and transmitted a message. A cold grin appeared on his face. Duanqing, oh Duanqing, see how I'll deal with you when the time comes." Of course, Qin Nan was unaware of all this. After Qin Nan left the cave, he quickly flew towards another location on the map. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, an entire day and night had passed. In the meantime, Qin Nan went to the 2 red dots on the map, and followed the directions on the map. He went deep into the bottom of a lake and a huge crack, where he found the hidden traps and destroyed countless formations, and acquired the heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. However, the remaining 2 spots were not as shocking as the first one. They only had 16 heavenly arcana spiritual fruits and 24 heavenly arcana spiritual fruit. The harvest this time is not bad. Qin Nan stood in the air with a grin on his face. If he could find more heavenly arcana sacred fruits in the upper arcana, he would be able to accumulate 3 million contribution points. Qin Nan suddenly raised his head as he sensed something. His eyes sharpened as he glanced into the sky. In the depths of the sky, strands of spiritual energy seemed to be attracted by an invisible force as they converged towards the sky. In less than 10 breaths, they had already formed a huge spiritual energy storm. Qin Nan was not the only one who noticed it. The cultivators who were fighting and searching in the spacious lower arcana raised their heads in astonishment. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Following this, the sky began to tremble vigorously. The sky within a few thousand li was dyed a deep purple, as if an invisible force had descended upon it. The storm of spiritual qi that had gathered began to transform continuously. Eventually, it turned into a 300 zhang long and 200 zhang wide mysterious white gate. It was exactly the same as the gate outside the Heavenly Fate mountain range, except that it was much smaller. Could this be the door to the upper arcana? Qin Nan's eyes flickered with astonishment. Normally, wouldn't the door only appear after a day and a half? By the way, when I was in the East Continent, the path of heavenly secrets seemed to have been opened earlier than expected? Qin Nan suddenly recalled something. The situation was exactly the same as what had happened in the past. Meanwhile, a series of explosions could be heard coming from the distance, which immediately interrupted Qin Nan's thoughts. Qin Nan turned around and saw a pitch-black giant boat with a length of 80 zhang and a width of 30 zhang, like a demonic sword flying toward the door with a shocking aura. Are they from the Dead Spirit tribe, one of the 8 ancient tribes? Qin Nan scanned the boat with his left eye of the divine god of battle and discovered 23 figures on the boat, each emitting a strong soul force. One of them had already withdrawn his aura, but Qin Nan could still see a wisp of monarch aura from him. It was a martial monarch of the Dead Spirit tribe. It seems like I'll have to change my plan. Qin Nan's eyes glittered as his aura changed tremendously, like a godly saber being drawn out from its sheath. Since the Dead Spirit tribe was here, the other ancient tribes, the 6 great forbidden grounds, and the people of the 3 great factions would be here soon. If he wanted to enter the upper arcana, he would have to make his move and acquire the 7 slaughter talisman. At this moment, in the sky above an ocean in the demigod region, a giant boat with a length of 200 zhang and a width of 90 zhang, which seemed to be made of an ancient godly tree, flew forward rapidly with a shocking aura. Inside a room on the boat, a middle-aged man in a golden robe opened his eyes all of a sudden. "I wonder why the kid is looking for me," the middle-aged man mumbled to himself. His eyes flickered as he scanned the place with his divine sense. 2 heavenly arcana sacred fruits, 80 heavenly arcana spiritual fruits, and a valuable map. That was a great fortune. With this fortune, even though I'm a human, I still have a chance to improve my cultivation. The middle-aged man's breathing instantly intensified. Without any hesitation, he quickly took out a badge and wore a respectful expression. "Elder son, please tell the princess that my son has found some incredible treasure in the lost herb garden, and I'm here to help." A moment later, the badge chimed again. It was a message from the elder. Oh. End of chapter. Chapter 12:10. While the middle-aged man was heading to the lower arcana, inside a palace at the center of the giant vessel. "Princess, Elder Hua just sent us a message. He said he would be heading there in advance." A white-haired old man brought his fists together and said, "The upper arcana is open in advance?" Princess Meow Meow asked while blinking her eyes. "Yes, Princess, it's open in advance. Pass down my order, we'll be entering the place in advance." Acknowledged. After Elder Sun turned around and left, Princess Meow Meow's eyes were filled with a hint of anticipation. Would Qin Nan be here? He should be, right? If he doesn't come to the ancient battleground, I won't forgive him, Princess Meow Meow murmured while waving her fists around. One had to know that this time, she had spent a lot of effort to convince those few old fellows to specially look for him. Time gradually passed. 3 hours later, in the lower arcana of the ancient battleground. Since the Dead Spirit Tribe had entered the Light Door, the Flame Tribe, Lightning Tribe, Undead Tribe, and the rest of the ancient tribes had arrived too. Many martial monarchs had yet to conceal their cultivation, thus they unleashed their monarch auras, attracting the attention of the cultivators. Up until now, 5 martial monarchs had arrived. As for Qin Nan, he was sitting on a boulder in the woods. His left eye emitted a purple glow as he stared into the sky. Wisps of battle intent were unleashed from his body. The battle blood in his body was boiling too. The easiest way for him to acquire the 7 Slaughter Talisman was to rob the people of the South Heaven Sacred Ground. However, since the South Heaven Sacred Ground would send martial monarchs here, it would be a tough battle. That being said, Qin Nan could rob the other factions too, especially those that did not have any martial monarchs following them. With his cultivation, he could easily rob them without any danger. However, Qin Nan did not do so because this was his bottom line. No matter how powerful he would not make a move on someone he had no enmity with. Otherwise, what was the difference between him and the bullies he hated? Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, 2 figures streaked across the sky at a shocking speed. Behind him, there were 3 other figures flying at a slightly slower speed. Qin Nan's 7 Luminaries Sword Talisman was here. In the next moment, a weak light suddenly shone out. Great Emperor Rongtian, Great Emperor Minkong, and Illusionist Great Emperor are here? Qin Nan raised his eyebrows slightly. Martial Monarch Minkong and Martial Monarch Rongtian did not waste any time and went straight to the entrance. On the other hand, the illusionist Martial Monarch hesitated for a moment and scanned the place with his divine sense. He left after failing to discover anything. Qin Nan narrowed his eyes. Time continued to pass. In the blink of an eye, 4 hours had passed. During this period of time, only one person from the ancient clan had arrived. The people from the 3 great powers had yet to arrive. Qin Nan suddenly turned around as he became aware of something. Whoosh, whoosh. A series of whooshes could be heard as strong gusts of wind blew the surrounding trees and flowers into the air. He could see a middle-aged man leading the way with a stern expression. Behind him were Huadun, Ao Sha, and a few other disciples of the ancient clan. "Duan Qing, we've finally found you." Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were overjoyed. Over the past few hours, they had used countless methods to search for Qin Nan in the lower arcana. "So you're Duan Qing? I'm one of the elders of the Lost Herb Garden. I won't waste any more time with you. Hand over all the heavenly arcana sacred fruits, heavenly arcana spiritual fruits, and the ancient map you have. If you kowtow to my son and apologize, I won't kill you." The middle-aged man placed his hands behind himself and said coldly while staring down at Qin Nan. The eyes of Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were filled with disdain. So what if he had picked the ancient map? Wasn't it the same now? They were going to take it away from him? An elder of the lost herb garden? Qin Nan was startled before he calmly said, "Forget it, I'll let it go on her account. You can leave now." If it was possible, he would rather not harm the people of the lost herb garden. The middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were startled. They could not believe their ears. Did he really think he was going to let them go under the circumstances? Ha ha, let it go? He simply did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. "Since you're so stubborn, don't blame me for bullying you." The middle-aged man burst out laughing as a strong aura burst out from his body. "Shut up." However, before he could finish, an icy voice exploded all of a sudden. In an instant, Qin Nan's figure moved. When he arrived above the middle-aged man and the others, he immediately unleashed his destruction domain and shrouded the few of them. He had given them a chance, but they did not cherish it. Therefore, he would not show them any mercy. The middle-aged man reacted fairly quickly. He immediately executed 3 monarch arts, which combined into a killing blow. However, the monarch arts were shattered into pieces by the destruction domain. What monarch art is that? The middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were startled seeing this. "Let's attack together," the middle-aged man yelled. As an elder, he was able to tell that Duan Qing was not an ordinary peak martial ancestor. Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others immediately reacted and unleashed their martial spirits and martial trees. However, Qin Nan dashed toward the crowd with a kick as if he did not see anything. How naive! The middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others uttered hollow laughs. Did he really think a mere Duan Qing could stand a chance against them when there were so many of them? However, the expressions of the middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others stiffened. The reason being that Qin Nan's figure was like a demon, who was able to dodge their monarch arts with ease. Even though each of his punches were simple, they were aimed at their weaknesses. Bang bang bang! A series of explosions took place in the wood. In just less than 300 breaths' time, the middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were completely suppressed by Qin Nan. "Father, what should we do?" The eyes of Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were filled with terror. They finally realized that this Duan Qing's strength had completely exceeded their imagination. This Duan Qing has yet to unleash his martial spirit and martial tree, but he's already so powerful. I'm afraid we won't stand a chance against him if we were to fight him. Besides, even if we were to defeat him, we would still suffer serious injuries, which would give the other cultivators an advantage. The middle-aged man mumbled to himself. He had already decided to withdraw from the battle. At that instant, a badge in the middle-aged man's summer ring suddenly emitted a faint glow. "This is..." The middle-aged man was startled, before he was overjoyed. He did not expect the people of the Lost Herb Garden to arrive at the lower arcana in advance. If that was the case, what was there to be afraid of? End of chapter. Chapter 12:11. Duan Qing. The middle-aged man's aura changed tremendously as he snapped. "I'm telling you, the people of the Lost Herb Garden are here. I'll give you one last chance, hand over the thing. Otherwise, you'll die for sure." The initially terrified Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were overjoyed upon hearing this. Qin Nan halted in his tracks and said, "Your Princess Miao Miao is here too? You know who the princess is?" The middle-aged man was startled, but he did not overthink it. After all, many people in the half-god region knew who the princess was. He let out a hollow laugh and said, "That's right, the princess is here too, so you'd better be smart." Qin Nan's eyes flickered. The princess was here too? It had been a long time since he last saw her. "I'm sorry, I won't be smart enough today." Qin Nan's lips curled upward as his right arm transformed into the heaven-shattering saber, which fired a shocking saber intent in the direction of the middle-aged man and the others. You! The middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were stunned. Was this guy out of his mind? He dared to attack even when the people of the Lost Herb Garden were here? Cruet, you forced me to do this. I'll just take less of what you have and give the rest to Elder Son. The middle-aged man's expression changed rapidly. He clenched his teeth and transmitted a message with his badge. The battle continued. After using the heaven-shattering saber, Qin Nan's strength skyrocketed. Even the middle-aged man and the others were unable to stop him despite using various forbidden moves. They were constantly knocked back, their figures covered in wounds, resulting in a miserable appearance. Stop it! Finally, a dignified shout resounded in the sky. An old white-haired man floated in the air with a monarch aura, as if he was going to shatter the rift. He was a martial monarch. Elder Hua, what's going on here? A crisp voice could be heard coming from the distance. Princess Miao Miao was wearing a crystal gold silk dress and a phoenix crown on her head. Together with her impressive figure and snow-white skin, she gave off the feeling that she was a goddess that had descended to the mortal world, causing all living things to lose their color. Qin Nan raised his head to take a look. He remembered her face very clearly, but when he saw her again, a feeling of amazement welled up in his heart. Even with his mental fortitude, he was still slightly dazed and a little absent-minded. Your Highness? The middle-aged man and Huadun shuddered. They did not expect the princess to be here. Ao Sha and the disciples of the ancient tribes wore respectful looks. The woman before them was none other than the famous Princess Miao Miao of the Lost Herb Garden, the future master of the Lost Herb Garden. Your Highness, this man is called Duan Qing. He's extremely disdainful and scornful. He kept humiliating my son. I tried to reason with him, but I was no match against him. After I told him your name, he even drew out his saber and tried to kill us all. The middle-aged man quickly collected his thoughts and blurted out. At the same time, he let out a hollow laugh in his heart. Judging from Princess Miao Miao's protective personality, this Duan Qing would surely suffer a fate worse than death after hearing his words. Is that so? Princess Miao Miao's eyes turned cold as she glanced at the man. She had initially come here with Elder Son because she was bored and wanted to look for Qin Nan. However, she did not expect someone to treat the people of the Lost Herb Garden like that. However, with a single glance, her expression instantly froze. Humph, you didn't want to hand it over. Now that the princess is infuriated, I can't wait to see what you're going to do. The middle-aged man uttered a hollow laugh in his heart. He could already see Duan Qing kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. Elder Hua, is he the person you mentioned? At that instant, Princess Miao Miao's calm voice could be heard once again. That's right, Your Highness, it's him. The middle-aged man was confused. Before he could finish his words, Princess Miao Miao's icy voice could be heard. Elder Hua, how bold of you to dare to touch him! Elder Son, take them away and cripple them all. His words were like a shocking clap of thunder. The middle-aged man, Huadun, Ao Sha, and the others were dumbfounded. What was going on? Weren't they supposed to cripple Duan Qing? Why was Princess Miao Miao crippling them now? Acknowledged. Elder Son did not hesitate. He waved his hand and fired countless monarch glows, grabbing the middle-aged man, Huadun, and the others. It felt like a giant had trapped a few ants in its cage. Qin Nan shrugged seeing this. He did not want to harm the people of the Lost Herb Garden, but he had already said what he needed to say. Besides, these people were asking for it, yet they still dared to ask Princess Miao Miao to harm them? Your Highness! What's going on here? We're supposed to catch Duan Qing. Why are you attacking us? Elder Son, put us down at once. The middle-aged man, Huadun, and the others were still in a daze. Catch Duan Qing? That's right, elder son, do it. Princess Meow Meow harumphed coldly. Elder son nodded, causing the monarch glows to tighten. The middle-aged man, Huadun, and the others cried out in agony as if they had just received a heavy blow from a giant. Elder son, stop it at once. Sun Yang, stop it at once. I'm from the Lost Herb Garden. How could you harm me instead of your enemy? I don't accept this. The middle-aged man uttered a roar. Elder son hesitated for a moment before glancing at Princess Meow Meow. As a matter of fact, he was quite confused as to why Princess Meow Meow would punish Elder Hua and the others. Not convinced. Then do you know this Duan Qing is Qin Nan? Princess Meow Meow wore an icy expression. Qin Nan? Elder son was startled, before he came to a realization. In the Lost Herb Garden, everyone, from the elders to the disciples, knew that Princess Meow Meow was quite fond of Qin Nan, who had surpassed the rules of cultivation. Besides, Princess Meow Meow had ordered many times that anyone who stumbled into Qin Nan was to help him and treat him with respect. Qin Nan? The middle-aged man and Huadun were dumbfounded. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that Duan Qing was actually the person that the princess cared so much about. At that instant, they immediately realized why Qin Nan was not intimidated when they had threatened Qin Nan so many times. Disobedience is a double offense. Elder son, punish them accordingly. Princess Meow Meow waved her hand and gave out the order. Acknowledged. Elder son Yang let out a hollow laugh. At that instant, countless moves landed on the middle-aged man and Huadun. End of chapter. Chapter 12:12. Qin Nan smacked his lips as he watched the scene unfold. He did not expect this elder son Yang, a martial monarch realm authority, to have such a wide range of methods of torture. In just a few breaths' time, he had made the middle-aged man and Huadun cry out in pain without any dignity, and even called elder son Yang father, master, etc. Princess, this is for you. Qin Nan took out a jade jar and handed it to the princess. The jar of wine was called the Bitter Ocean Brew, which he had bought for the princess at Linran City. Wow! Princess Meow Meow was overjoyed. She immediately kept the jade jar and realized that she was being a little inappropriate. She immediately let out a cough and harumphed. Not bad, I didn't waste my efforts on you. You even know to bring me a gift. Elder son Yang, who was not far away, laughed bitterly in his heart when he saw this. With his observation, he could easily tell that it was only a jar of the Bitter Ocean Brew. Previously, when the princess had returned to the Lost Herb Garden, the young masters of the ancient tribes and the authorities had given her lots of good wines when they learned that the princess was fond of wine. However, the princess had never taken a single glance at them, let alone being so overjoyed. Take this 7 slaughter talisman. Princess Meow Meow suddenly blinked her eyes and took out a talisman. Qin Nan was startled. He shook his head and said, Princess, that won't do. I can't accept the talisman. It's fine if you don't want it. Princess Meow Meow rolled her eyes and said, If you don't want it, I'll take everything in your summer ring. After hearing these words, Qin Nan immediately took 2 steps back, while his face was filled with vigilance. He knew how greedy the princess was. She would take anything she saw, regardless of how valuable it was. He had suffered a lot when he was still at the Xianling clan. What do you mean by that? Princess Meow Meow snapped. I don't care, you have to take this 7 slaughter talisman. Of course, I'm not giving it to you for free. When we go to the Upper Arcana, you have to listen to my orders. You want to enter the Upper Arcana with me? No, absolutely not. Qin Nan shook his head. Everyone knew that the South Heaven sacred ground was filled with danger. Qin Nan was fine on his own, but he did not want to involve the princess. Moreover, the princess is going with the people from the Lost Herb Garden. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Obviously, he would be able to reap greater benefits. Princess, Elder Sun Yang also wanted to say something, but halfway through his words, he noticed the look in the princess's eyes and dared not say anything else. If this princess says to go, then go. Don't forget, you're my man. Princess Meow Meow snorted, displeasure written all over her face. Had this Qin Nan forgotten that she had slept with him at the desolated battleground? All right. Qin Nan let out a wry smile. Seeing her reaction, he fell silent for a while before nodding his head. He was well aware of the princess's personality. Once she had made up her mind, no one would be able to stop her. That's more like it. Princess Meow Meow's expression changed instantly. She let out a brilliant smile, causing the surroundings to brighten up. At that instant, 3 formidable auras burst out from the sky. Raising his head, he saw a giant blue sword flying toward the white door at a shocking pace. 2 powerful monarch auras were emitted from the giant sword without any concealment. On top of that, there were also more than 20 auras of the peak martial ancestor. Behind the giant sword was a giant 7-colored lotus and a pitch-black ship, each with a monarch aura and the auras of more than 10 peak martial progenitors. The 3 great factions have arrived. Elder Sun Yang's eyes flickered. The giant sword, the lotus, and the black ship belonged to the South Heaven Sacred Ground, the Jade Lake Sacred Ground, and the Martial Principal Sect. South Heaven Sacred Ground, huh? A murderous intent flickered in Qin Nan's eyes. Cultivator Qin Nan, I hope you know that no matter what happens in the upper arcana, I don't want to see the princess being harmed. Otherwise, Elder Sun Yang glanced at Qin Nan and transmitted his voice. His eyes emitted an imperious aura that penetrated Qin Nan's soul. Elder Sun, don't worry. Even if I have to die, I won't let the princess be harmed. Qin Nan said with a firm expression. Elder Sun Yang nodded slightly upon hearing this. Although Qin Nan had yet to achieve the martial monarch realm, thus making him useless to the Lost Herb Garden, he was quite impressed by Qin Nan's attitude. Qin Nan, let's go. Princess Meow Meow said excitedly. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page, Dian Dian urged excitedly. She could not remember how long it had been since the last time she went on an adventure with Qin Nan. Sure. Qin Nan nodded. The two took a step forward and turned into 2 rays of light. After activating the 7 slaughter talisman, they successfully entered the white, glowing door. Sigh, forget it, as long as the princess is happy. After all, when the time comes, things won't be the same as now. Elder Sun Yang let out a sigh in his heart as he watched the 2 leave. Saying this, he felt a little depressed, thus he continued to torture Hu Dun and the others with different methods. Time gradually passed. A few thousand breaths later, following 2 whooshes, Qin Nan and Princess Meow Meow's figures landed in an unfamiliar space. As soon as they landed, Qin Nan quickly scanned his surroundings with his left eye of the divine god of battle. The upper arcana and the lower arcana were completely different. It was as if the spacious land had been through countless battles, leaving countless cracks on the ground. Even after so long, the aura of the battle was still present. This was a real battlefield. Qin Nan, I've found this map from the Lost Herb Garden. It's marked with a location where the heavenly arcana sacred fruits are located. Princess Meow Meow waved her hand and took out an ancient map with a proud look. Let's go and take a look. Qin Nan transformed back into his true form. He followed the princess and proceeded forward. However, little did Qin Nan know, in the half-god region, the heavenly fortune mountain range, phew. Big sis, are we not there yet? The 2 hounds said while panting heavily. For the past 2 days, they had been rushing through the night without a moment's rest. They were almost as tired as dogs. We're here, look. Skeleton Xiao Hong came to a stop. The 2 hounds and the heavenly fortune mouse raised their heads and saw a giant white door at the top of a mountain in the distance. Why does this door look so familiar? The two hounds were confused. Squeak, squeak. The heavenly fortune mouse nodded in agreement. The flames in Xiao Hong's eyes flickered even more vigorously after hearing the words. If she was right, they might be able to enter that place. End of chapter. Chapter 12-13. After Skeleton Xiao Hong and the others silently entered the ancient battleground in the Upper Arcana. Qin Nan and Princess Miao Miao followed the instructions on the map and worked together as they made their way to the Upper Arcana, which resulted in a shocking outcome, allowing them to acquire precious treasures. The main reason was that Princess Miao Miao was the princess of the Lost Herb Garden, and her true form was the nine-spirited ascended ginseng. She was born with a magical power that allowed her to control the plants within a large area, allowing her to locate the treasures through them. With such an ability, and Qin Nan's left eye of the divine god of battle, it was easy for them to break through the forbidding auras and retrieve the treasures. Time gradually passed. An hour was gone in the blink of an eye. Qin Nan and Princess Miao Miao were getting closer to the location indicated on the map, allowing them to acquire more treasures along the way. However, to Qin Nan's disappointment, they had yet to stumble into anyone from the South Heaven sacred ground. All of a sudden, Princess Miao Miao halted in her tracks and sensed the surroundings, before she blurted out in excitement, "Qin Nan, the place marked on the map is quite extraordinary. There are already 3 martial monarchs and 18 peak martial ancestor cultivators there." 3 martial monarchs? Qin Nan's eyes flickered with excitement. The two exchanged glances with one another and nodded. They withdrew their auras and flew forward like phantoms. Since the place was so extraordinary, they had to go. However, with the presence of the martial monarchs, they had to be careful. After the period it took an incense to burn, Qin Nan and Princess Miao Miao both came to a stop. There was an enormous ravine that was over 1 kilometer wide and over 100 kilometers long on the ground ahead. Even though countless years had passed, it still surged with strands of extremely material and sharp sword insight. It was obvious how extraordinary and terrifying the person who had wielded the sword in the past was. Qin Nan slowly walked in and looked down into the ravine. At the bottom of the ravine were countless strange plants, lakes, ancient forests, etc. Inside the ancient forest, 18 peak martial ancestor cultivators with martial spirits and martial trees floated behind them as they executed a series of shocking monarch arts in an intense battle. Among the cultivators, there were people from the South Heaven sacred ground, the martial principal sect, the disciples of the 8 ancient tribes, and 3 rogue cultivators. Qin Nan was not familiar with any of them, but 2 of them were quite familiar to Qin Nan. These 2 people were none other than Sun Wuhe. Elder Lu Shui, please turn the page. Since Sun Wu and Lu Shui are here, doesn't that mean? Qin Nan's heart trembled as he shifted his gaze. In the deepest part of the ravine, there was an extremely ancient and gigantic palace that was emanating spiritual light. Inside the palace, 3 shocking forces were fighting one another. Blinding monarch glows and formidable monarch auras surged into the surroundings. The ancient palace trembled vigorously, as if it was going to collapse at any second. With his left eye, Qin Nan discovered that one of the martial monarchs was the illusionist martial monarch. As for the other 2 martial monarchs, they were a middle-aged man with a scholarly appearance, and an old man with fiery eyes in a Taoist robe. Martial monarchs of the South Heaven sacred ground and the martial monarch of the Flame tribe? Qin Nan raised his brows and squinted. The martial monarch of the South Heaven sacred ground would most likely try to kill Qin Nan as soon as he discovered Qin Nan's presence. He was a potential enemy of life and death. As for the illusionist martial monarch, even though they were not his enemy, they were like fire and water. Qin Nan had long planned to teach him a lesson when he arrived at the ancient battleground. Now, he had encountered 2 such groups of enemies. Let's see what they're competing for, Qin Nan murmured as he took a closer look. Following a glimpse, his eyes flickered with astonishment as his heart burned passionately. The cultivators of the martial ancestor realm were competing for 2 heavenly arcana sacred fruits on an ancient tree. As for the 3 martial monarchs in the ancient palace, they were competing for 20 heavenly arcana sacred fruits sealed inside a giant blue crystal. A total of 22 heavenly arcana sacred fruits were equivalent to 3,300,000 contribution points. If he could acquire them, he could easily exchange them for a piece of the Kanglan tree. Calm down first. If it's a head-on battle, it shouldn't be a problem for me to deal with these peak martial ancestor realm cultivators. However, with my current cultivation, I have no chance against the 3 martial monarchs. Qin Nan quickly thought of a solution. His eyes flickered after a brief moment of deduction. He had come up with a perfect plan. Although it was a little crazy and risky, it was definitely worth a try. Princess, you should attack first and claim the 2 heavenly arcana sacred fruit. Then, use a killing blow to attack the entire palace, and then. Qin Nan quickly turned around and said to Princess Meow Meow. To continue, please turn the page. Sure. Princess Meow Meow's eyes flickered. She did not expect Qin Nan to come up with such a plan. Although it was a little crazy and dangerous, she liked it a lot. She was completely attracted by the number of heavenly arcana sacred fruit. She would not give up as long as there was a chance. Whoosh! Princess Meow Meow did not waste any time. With a kick, she turned into a beam of light and flew into the ancient forest. Who's there? Sun Wu and Lu Shui were startled. They did not expect someone to show up at this time. The rest of the martial ancestor realm cultivators raised their heads too. That being said, Princess Meow Meow's interference did not attract the attention of the 3 martial monarchs in the palace. Born to be the ruler, commanding everything. Heavenly arcana sacred fruits, come to me. Princess Meow Meow's figure emitted a golden glow like a peerless empress with an imperious aura. As she waved her hand, the ancient tree with 2 heavenly arcana sacred fruits began to buzz as if it was being summoned. It rose from the ground and flew toward the princess. Is that Sun Wu, Lu Shui, and the rest of the cultivators shuddered. They had never seen such an unbelievable move. You won't get away with it. They soon collected their thoughts and became infuriated. They fired several shocking monarch arts in the direction of the princess. Princess Meow Meow seemed to have predicted it. She stomped the ground and left a golden glow behind her. She disappeared into thin air within the blink of an eye and reappeared somewhere else, dodging the attack. Lotus of the Earth. Princess Meow Meow performed a hand seal and uttered a roar. A magical force burst out from her body. In the huge gully, the strange flowers and ancient trees seemed to be summoned by an emperor. They spat out rays of green light and gathered in the air. In the blink of an eye, they formed a huge yellow lotus flower, which rippled with a terrifying aura. Such a terrifying monarch art! Sun Wu, Lu Shui, and the rest of the cultivators felt their scalps turning numb as they took a few steps backward. If the monarch art was aimed at them, they would not be able to resist it with their current strength. Destroy! Princess Meow Meow waved her hand. Under the astounded gaze of the crowd, the Lotus of the Earth collided with the ancient palace. End of the chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.